Sailing. The comprehension is against the sky, and the 8 gates are comprehended at the beginning. Chapter 31. Am I dreaming? The main ship of Crick was cut from the middle. Such a huge battleship was actually. How is this possible? On the outer deck of the Bharati, people were watching the extremely shocking scene in front of them, all exclaiming in disbelief. Zoro's eyes were fixed on the man standing on the coffin board. The moment he saw Hawkeye, his pupils and body couldn't help trembling, and there was only that figure in his eyes. Luffy's attention was also on Hawkeye at this time. After all, he was the world's #1 swordsman. At this moment, Luffy suddenly heard someone calling his name. Brother Luffy. Brother Luffy. Luffy looked in the direction of the voice and saw Joseph and Johnny running over from the deck of the docked passenger ship, saying anxiously. Brother Luffy and sister Nami left on the boat alone. What? Usopp was the first to scream. Yuta was also very surprised. Nami. Why? Luffy appeared calm, but he was secretly sighing. Nami, you still didn't choose to rely on me as the captain. Johnny handed Luffy a folded note and said. Brother Luffy, Sister Nami asked us to give this note to you. Luffy took the note and opened it. Luffy, I'll accept your treasure, he. When they knew I was a treasure thief, they invited me on board. Luffy, you really. What an idiot. Luffy looked at the note, his heart trembling slightly. Where his hand touched, there were a few wet marks. Touching the still wet places, Luffy could even imagine Nami crying. Luffy, we have to hurry up and catch up with Nami. She just left not long ago, and now we can still see the shadow of the Mary. Usopp said anxiously at this time. The ship that Nami took away was the ship that Kaya gave them. Luffy, I'll be back soon. At this time, Zoro, who had been silent all the time, suddenly spoke up. Luffy nodded his approval. For Zoro, this was the most critical moment in his life, and he couldn't stop it. Then, Luffy said to the others. Nami, let's go after her later. She's my navigator, no one can take her away. On the Mary. Nami looked at Bharati who was gradually moving away, tears streaming down her face. Luffy, everyone, I'm sorry. I really can't involve you guys in this. When I buy back Kokoja village, maybe we will meet again. At that time, will you still invite me to be your partner? Nami wiped her tears and cried at the stern. On the Bharati side. On the split huge ship of Crick. The pirate stood on the slowly sinking ship and looked at Hawkeye and asked angrily. What's your grudge against us? Why are you chasing us? Hawkeye looked up at the sky with a blank look in his eyes. Because I'm bored. Hearing this answer, the pirates were immediately shocked and angry. What? Oh my god. What's the reason? You, go to hell. One pirate couldn't suppress his anger, took out 2 guns and shot at Hawkeye continuously. Hawkeye suddenly pulled out a huge black knife from his back and swung it casually. All the bullets shot by the pirate were blocked. The pirate was shocked and exclaimed in disbelief. Without. Missed it. Just then, a voice sounded beside him. He used a knife to change the trajectory. As long as he doesn't want you to hit him, it doesn't matter how many times you shoot. The pirate immediately looked at the man with green hair beside him. Who are you? Zoro ignored the pirates and looked at Hawkeye. I have never seen such a sharp knife. Hawkeye remained calm and looked as bored as ever. A sword is not strong if it is not sharp. How about I use this sword to cut off this ship? Zoro smiled when he heard this, and his eyes were filled with fighting spirit. Sure enough, it's not simple. He took off the headscarf tied on his arm and said while tying it. I came to this sea just to see you. Hawkeye said coldly. Your purpose is. Zoro tied his turban, raised the corners of his mouth, and looked ready to fight. Become the strongest swordsman. At this time, the surrounding pirates suddenly noticed the 3 swords on Zoro's waist and exclaimed. 3 knives. Could this guy be? There is no mistake, this guy is the pirate hunter Zoro, the 3-sword style Roronoa Zoro. When these words came out, the whole audience was in an uproar. What? He's a pirate hunter. That guy actually. Pirate hunter versus the world's strongest swordsman. Clark Sanji, including Zeph and others were shocked by Zoro's identity. Pirate hunter Zoro is too famous in the East China Sea. At this time, Zoro looked at Hawkeye and continued. You are bored, right? Then I will come and play with you, how about that? Hawkeye looked at Zoro, like an ant. You are so sad. Not every swordsman has to draw his sword to prove he is strong. The disparity in power between you and me is obvious even to an outsider. And you dare to challenge me with a sword. Should I say that I admire you? Or should I say that you are ignorant? Zorone drew the 3 swords at his waist and said, "This is my dream, and it is also to fulfill the promise between me and my friends. To be honest, I didn't expect to meet you so early." Hawkeye looked impatient. "Stop talking nonsense." Zoro's eyes suddenly fixed when he heard this, and he said in a deep voice, "Hey, draw your sword." Hawkeye took off the cross pendant from his neck and pulled it open. Inside was a palm-sized knife. Then, he looked at Zoro and said contemptuously, "To deal with a small character like you, there is no need to draw a sword, just a small knife is enough. Because I am the strongest swordsman in the world. Among the 4 equal parts of the sea divided by the Red Earth continent and the Grand Line, the East China Sea is the weakest one. And you, just like the weakest Dong Hai, are the weakest." Zoro frowned and looked angry when he heard this. "How dare you look down on me? I want you to die with your eyes wide open." With a roar, Zoro suddenly exerted his strength. A strong momentum suddenly burst out from his whole body. The next second, a touch of black appeared on his hands. The black extended along his hands, and the airflow like black ghost energy wrapped around the 3 sabers. The blades of the 3 swords were also covered with black. Hawkeye saw this scene, and his pupils trembled and his expression was surprised. On the deck of Baratie, Luffy has been silently watching Zoro and Hawkeye. As early as the moment when Zoro confronted Hawkeye, he gave Zoro his extraordinary understanding. This battle is a good opportunity for Zoro to learn powerful swordsmanship. Perhaps, his strength will be able to undergo a qualitative change after this battle. Hawkeye and Zoro. Seeing Zoro's hands and the blade suddenly covered in black, Hawkeye was shocked. "What? You can actually be domineering." Zoro's mouth opened into an arc, with confidence in his eyes. "Don't underestimate me." Hawkeye looked at the confident Zoro and shook his head slightly. It is rare to see a swordsman who can use haki in the weakest East China Sea, but your domineering spirit is still too immature, it is totally ineffective. Zoro's face immediately showed anger when he heard this. He stepped back with his left foot, bent his body forward, and held the 2 swords crosswise on both sides of his body. "Demon Slash!" Zoro shouted angrily. His figure seemed to teleport, and in a flash he was in front of Hawkeye, slashing at him with 2 swords crossed. However, ding! There was a clanging sound of weapons colliding. Hawkeye easily used the toy-like knife to block Zoro's Demon Slash. In an instant, everyone was shocked. Johnny and Joseph's pupils trembled and they screamed in shock. He actually blocked Big Brother's Ghost Slash. That's a surefire way to hit the enemy. Jefu frowned slightly. The pirate hunter is much stronger than the rumors say. He is famous even in the Grand Line. Facing the world's best swordsman, is the gap in strength so huge? Sanji secretly sighed. I didn't expect that green algae-headed guy to have such strength. If I had fought him at that time, I would not have been his opponent. Usopp exclaimed, holding his head. No way. That Hawkeye can block Zoro so easily. That man is too scary. Luffy, when we go to the Grand Line, we must avoid this man. But Luffy and Yuta had expected this. Zoro is very strong in this East China Sea, but when it comes to the Grand Line, especially when facing people in the New World, he is not worth mentioning now. As for Zoro, seeing that he was blocked so casually, he was also extremely shocked. I can't move. What on earth did this guy do? Just using that toy, you can block my moves. How? How can it be? No. Impossible. No matter what, my dream can never be so far away from me. My dream world shouldn't be so far away. Zoro roared in his heart, and then swung 3 swords wildly, fighting with Hawkeye. From the perspective of others, they could only see the flashes of swords and shadows between the 2, which was dazzling. The sword energy that flew out from time to time actually left traces on the hull under their feet. The onlookers were stunned by this scene. So strong. Is that the pirate hunter and the world's best swordsman? He's simply a monster. Joseph, isn't Brother Sauron much stronger now than when he left us? I feel the same way, Johnny. Brother Zoro is now several times stronger than before. It's terrifying. The onlookers were shocked by the fight between the two, and Hawkeye was also shocked by Zoro. He could clearly feel Zoro's progress. It seemed that every time he swung his sword, he would make some progress. Hawkeye was shocked. What kind of terrifying speed is this? He swung his sword fiercely, knocking Zoro away. I admit that I misjudged you. Maybe one day in the future, you will grow into a real strong man. But now, I don't care what mission you have or how much you want to become stronger. Since you have drawn your sword against me, your defeat is already certain. Zoro did not hesitate to stand up and change his fighting posture again. He placed the two swords in his hands side by side behind his left back, forming a cross, with the sword on his mouth. Tiger Hunt. Zoro roared, and rushed out again. With a splash of blood, Zoro's chest was easily pierced by Hawkeye's knife. The scene was shocked again. Joseph and Johnny burst into tears and shouted in worry. Big brother. A hint of disdain appeared in Click's eyes. The pirate hunter in the legend is just like this. It looks like I can easily crush him. Zafu's eyes showed regret. After all, the gap is too big. Sanji didn't know why he started to worry about Zoro. That rascal. Hurry up and give up. Hawkeye had doubts in his eyes. Why didn't you step back or dodge? He clearly felt that Sauron could step back and dodge, but the other party rushed straight at him and was stabbed by him. Sauron looked determined and said in a deep voice. I have no idea. But what is certain is that if I retreat, the oaths and promises that I once valued will all disappear. And then, there will be no return. Zoro suddenly gritted his teeth, and the fighting spirit in his eyes burst out again. I would rather die in battle than live in disgrace. At this moment, Hawkeye was shocked. It was the first time he had encountered such a strong desire to win. At the same time, a prompt came to Luffy's mind. You have an extraordinary understanding. Through personal visualization and understanding of transmission, your spirit as a conductor is enhanced. Your conductor's spirit has been enhanced, and the awakening of Conqueror's Haki has been accelerated. Hawkeye's eyes began to become serious, and he pulled out the knife stuck in Zoro's chest. Boy, tell me your name. Zoro switched to a fighting form again, put his hands together, and the two knives in his hands and the knife in his mouth formed a windmill shape. Roronoa Zoro. Hawkeye put away the knife in his hand and pulled out the black knife behind him. Roronoa Zoro. I'll remember you. Who are you? A rare strong man. I will treat him with the etiquette of a swordsman. Use this world's strongest black sword to end your life. Hawkeye leaned forward and placed the black sword beside him. This was the first time he took Zoro's challenge seriously. Seeing this, Zoro also burst out with all his strength. The two swords in his hands began to spin, like a whirlwind. Three swords style secret, 3,000 worlds. The two men burst out at the same time, and the flash of swords and shadows, the two figures have already crossed. Ding! The sound of weapons breaking rang out, and the two swords in Zoro's hands broke. One strike, the victory and the defeat were decided. Is this the strongest power in the world? Zoro sighed in his heart, silently put away the Wado Ikimonji. Then he turned around, faced Hawkeye, opened his arms, and prepared to face death. Hawkeye was puzzled by this scene and asked, Boy, what do you want to do? Zoro smiled faintly. The scar on the back is a swordsman's shame. For a moment, Hawkeye was shocked. Then his mouth corners raised, with excitement and appreciation in his eyes. You have the guts. At the same time, Luffy received another reminder in his mind. You have an extraordinary understanding. Through personal visualization and understanding of transmission, your spirit as a conductor is enhanced. Your conductor's spirit is enhanced, and the awakening of Conqueror's Haki is accelerated. Facing Zoro's awakening, Hawkeye slowly raised his knife. Suddenly, he slashed diagonally. Instantly, blood splattered. Zoro fell to the ground. Big brother. Zoro. Green algae head. Worried cries rang out from all around. Even though Luffy had expected this, he still felt emotional when he saw this scene. After all, Zoro was also his crew member, and seeing his men being beaten up would be a bit moving. However, he knew from his observation Haki that Zoro was still alive, and Hawkeye did not kill him. But he had to be treated quickly. Luffy jumped to Zoro's side and prepared to take him to the hospital for treatment. Who are you to him? Hawkeye noticed Luffy's sudden arrival and asked in confusion. I am his captain and he is the swordsman of my pirate group. Luffy responded. Hawkeye nodded and said, you found a good swordsman. Suddenly, Hawkeye noticed the straw hat on Luffy's head and was stunned for a moment. Just as he was about to ask, a dissatisfied voice suddenly came from nearby. Hawkeye, you are too much. The opponent is so different from you, and you are so heavy-handed. Everyone looked over and saw a beautiful girl with half-red and half-white hair angrily looking at Hawkeye. Suddenly, everyone in the audience was stunned. Usopp was so scared that his legs began to shake, and he said tremblingly. Hello. Yuta. Don't anger that guy. He will kill us. Joseph and Johnny hugged each other and cried for Yuta. Sister Yuta, please apologize to him quickly, we don't want to die yet. The people of the Click Pirates looked at Yuta with a gloating look. That woman dared to speak to Hawkeye like that, she is definitely dead now. Sanji, Zeph and others looked at Yuta in shock. They had only heard Yuta say that she had seen Hawkeye duel with someone, but they did not know Yuta's identity, so they thought she was just an ordinary pirate. But now it seems that this woman must be extraordinary. When Hawkeye heard someone angrily accusing him, he felt that the voice sounded familiar. He looked and saw the person with half-red and half-white hair. Yuta. Hawkeye recognized Yuta at a glance. Even though he hadn't seen her for 10 years, Yuta's hair and dress were really easy to recognize. At this time, Yuta also jumped to Luffy's side and angrily accused Hawkeye. How dare you, Hawkeye, bully the swordsman on our ship like this? I'll tell Shanks and he'll teach you a lesson. Hawkeye was unmoved by what he said and said calmly. He challenged me, I did this out of respect for him. Besides, he is not dead yet. Hawkeye looked at Zoro lying motionless on the ground and said. My name is Jorakul Mihawk. You won't die so soon. As long as you can beat me, you will be the strongest in the world. No matter how many years it takes, I will be waiting for you on the throne of the world's strongest. So you have to be strong and fight against death. I am waiting for you to challenge me again. Surpass me. Roronoa Zoro. At this moment, Zoro, who had been lying on the ground, suddenly pulled out the Wado Ikimonji, pointed it at the sky, and said weakly. Road. Luffy, did you hear that? Luffy looked at Zoro. I heard it. Sauron said with blood all over his face, gritting his teeth. I made you worry. If you can't become the strongest swordsman in the world, it would just add to your burden, right? Cough cough. Zoro coughed up some blood, but he didn't mind. He held his forehead with one hand, tears streaming down his face, his eyes more determined than ever before, and he used all his strength, gritted his teeth, and swore heartbreakingly. So I won't lose again. Zoro finished speaking. The next second, Hawkeye's pupils suddenly shrank. Luffy's body also shook. An unparalleled momentum suddenly burst out from Zoro. Purple-black lightning burst out from the tip of his sword pointing to the sky, like a roaring beast, crackling and spreading around. With Zoro as the center, purple-black lightning cut through the air and spread thousands of meters away. In just a moment, all the pirates of the Click Pirates and everyone on Baratie rolled their eyes and fainted. And now, only Hawkeye, Luffy, and Yuta are still standing on the field. In the weakest East China Sea, the rest of them are not enough to resist the power of the Conqueror's color. It turns out, is it the Conqueror's Haki? Hawkeye was deeply shocked by Zoro. He didn't expect that in the weakest East China Sea, he could meet such a swordsman. If he could grow up one day, he would definitely leave his name in this world. Luffy was also very happy for Zoro. This battle made Zoro's strength leap to a higher level again. I believe that his growth rate will only be faster in the future. Yuta, let's take Zoro to the hospital for treatment. Zoro had used up all his strength in awakening his Conqueror's Haki, and he had lost consciousness. Wait a minute. At this moment, Hawkeye suddenly stopped Luffy. Luffy looked at him in confusion, and then he heard Hawkeye continue to say. Come to think of it, you should be the man that Red Hair mentioned to me. That. Born to be a king. Yuta, take Zoro to the hospital for treatment first. Luffy told Yuta, and then he answered Hawkeye. If Shanks only met one natural king, it would be me. Hawkeye said with a twinkling look, looking a little excited. The red-haired man told me about you. You were only 7 years old and you were able to master the Conqueror's Haki. You are indeed a rare genius. His high evaluation of you makes me interested in you too. What is your name, kid? Luffy replied. Monkey D. Luffy. D. Hawkeye muttered. Suddenly, he drew the black knife from his back again. He looked at Luffy seriously and said, Monkey D. Luffy. Come on. Let me see what kind of genius is this that the red-haired man admires so much. Seeing Hawkeye suddenly draw his sword against Luffy, Yuta panicked. Hawkeye, what are you going to do? Luffy is mine. My captain, if you dare to hurt him, I will not let you go. Hawkeye's eyes were still fixed on Luffy, and he said slowly. I'm just testing the level of the man that red hair likes. I won't kill him. Yuta wanted to say something, but was interrupted by Luffy. Okay, Yuta, I'm fine. Take Zoro to get treatment. In fact, Luffy also wanted to fight Hawkeye. Hawkeye is the top fighter in this world. If he could fight with such a person with all his strength, the improvement he would get would definitely be huge. Moreover, since Luffy's strength and physique have become stronger and stronger, he has not used the ability of extreme enhancement for a long time. Limit enhancement. When your body functions reach their limits, after a full rest, your physical fitness will break through and improve significantly. Because he has not met a suitable opponent, and his current strength cannot reach the limit through practice alone, Luffy has not used this skill for many years. If he uses this ability now, the improvement he gets may allow Luffy to break through and cross a level of strength. Seeing that Luffy said so, Yuta couldn't stop him anymore, so he just told him. Then you have to be careful, this guy is very strong. In fact, even Yuta didn't know how strong Luffy was when he was fighting with all his strength, but she was too impressed by Hawkeye's sparring with Shanks, so she was still worried about Luffy. After Yuta brought Zoro back to Baratie, she looked for medicine and bandages on the ship and treated him simply. As for Luffy and Hawkeye, Hawkeye raised his black knife, pointed it at Luffy, and said, Make your move, Straw Hat Boy. Luffy didn't waste any words after hearing this. He was fighting with Hawkeye as his sparring partner. Therefore, he not only had to practice and improve his armament haki and observation haki, but also had to fully develop his limits and completely drain all his physical strength and haki. In this way, when he recovers again, his strength will have a qualitative leap. Luffy raised his right hand, and a black color had already appeared on it. Then, he brought his armament haki enhanced arm to his mouth. Fourth gear. Luffy's deep voice sounded. Then, Luffy's arm, which was strengthened by armament haki, expanded rapidly in a twisted shape like a balloon. Just like the air flowing through the body, the twisted expansion state spread throughout the body, and his whole body also expanded immediately. The next second, a fourth gear Luffy with a huge upper body like a giant, slender legs like springs, and a face full of evil appeared in front of Hawkeye. His arms were black and red like red-hot iron blocks, and the sweat evaporated as if it turned into white auspicious clouds, lingering around his body like ribbons. Fourth gear is a state produced by the extreme development and application of armament haki. In this state, Luffy can improve and strengthen armament haki most quickly through his extraordinary understanding. Looking at Luffy, who burst out with momentum in an instant, Hawkeye's eyes were obviously brighter. Not bad, your armament haki is already among the strongest. As soon as he finished speaking, Hawkeye's body suddenly burst out with a strong momentum. His sword body was like floating through wisps of green air, and his momentum suddenly climbed to an unparalleled height. Rubber. Luffy shouted in a deep voice. He pulled his huge fist back into his body like a spring, using the strong elastic force to double the attack power of his fist. Then, he used his slender legs to compress the air. His whole body suddenly rushed forward with the help of the air jet, and in an instant he crossed the distance between him and Hawkeye. Quote. Ape King Spear. With Luffy's roar, the huge fist accelerated by elastic force suddenly shot out and hit Hawkeye. Like a cannonball fired out of a gun, it made a rumbling sound. Hawkeye's eyes focused, holding the knife with both hands, and his body shape changed rapidly at a speed that was difficult to detect with the naked eye. Although the attack was launched only a few meters away, Hawkeye easily blocked it. Boom. With a roar, Luffy was repelled by Hawkeye's powerful sword energy. Is that all? Hawkeye frowned slightly, looking dissatisfied. Luffy, however, grinned with a happy expression. Because in his mind, You have a natural comprehension, and through combat experience, your armament haki has been strengthened. When fighting against such a strong man, the greater the attack power, the greater the improvement. And he fought with the mentality of letting Hawkeye be a free sparring partner, so naturally he had to squeeze Hawkeye. If he used his strongest moves to fight, and Hawkeye was not interested in playing with him, wouldn't it be a waste of an opportunity? It's not over yet. Luffy responded. Then he pulled both fists towards his body at the same time. He shot air with his legs and jumped into the air. Then he aimed at Hawkeye. Rubber Ape King Crow Cannon. Luffy launched a machine gun version of the Ape King Spear at Hawkeye in a diving posture. 6 continuous giant fist phantoms seemed to form in the air, accompanied by roars, continuously bombarding Hawkeye. Hawkeye's sharp eagle eyes turned rapidly, catching the huge group attack of the Ape King Spear in the air, which was attacking densely and at a very fast speed. The black knife in his hand also suddenly accelerated, swinging out a series of phantoms. The powerful collision of armed color domineering, coupled with Luffy's pouring attack, soon shattered half of the giant ship under his feet. Hawkeye then jumped and came to the remaining half of the giant ship. After a continuous combo, Luffy's armed color domineering was strengthened again. Hawkeye couldn't help but sigh at this time, and said, "What a random attack method." Luffy did not stop and launched another attack. Maintaining the 4th gear consumes haki, and he did not want to waste haki on maintaining this state. Rubber Rhino Howitzer. Rubber Lion Bazooka. Rubber Great Ape King Gun. Luffy threw various attack skills at Hawkeye one after another. His armament haki was strengthened again and again. Hawkeye is indeed the world's top strongman. Luffy almost raised the strength of his armament haki to another level from him, which is enough to reach the top level. Rubber Lion King Bazooka. Luffy shouted. On the basis of gigantism, he blew air into his arms again. Soon, the 2 arms appeared in a super gigantic form that was comparable to a giant ship. Luffy clenched his hands into the shape of tiger claws and compressed them into his body. Then he blasted out with all his strength, and the huge roar was comparable to thunder. With unparalleled momentum, Luffy's arms, which were as big as giant ships, rushed towards Hawkeye like a super bazooka. Hawkeye frowned at this time, with a solemn look on his face and a strong confusion in his eyes. He always had a strange feeling that Luffy's armed color seemed to become stronger and stronger as he fought with him. So much so that now, when Luffy used this trick, even he felt it was tricky. He is indeed the man that red hair favors. Hawkeye sighed from the bottom of his heart. At this time, he had already recognized Luffy. Then, I will show you the world's best slash. After saying that, Hawkeye tightened his grip on the black knife again. An astonishing aura burst out from him. The next moment, green air filled his black knife, spreading outward like ripples. He suddenly swung it in the direction of Luffy, and a slash that seemed to cut through the sea flew towards Luffy. Boom! The moment the slash collided with Luffy's Lion King Bazooka, the sky and the earth roared, and the sea surged. The powerful energy collision set off gusts of wind. The sea area within a radius of dozens of kilometers suddenly became turbulent and stormy. The huge offshore restaurant Bharati replica, it was as if the Buddha was about to be overturned and torn to pieces. Under this violent shaking, many people with good strength gradually woke up at this moment. Zeph, Sanji, Usopp, Crick, Kin and dozens of others, as well as Zoro who had just awakened the Conqueror's haki and fainted, also woke up. Before they had time to wonder why they suddenly fainted, everyone seemed to have seen a ghost, looking at the shocking scene of the huge slash rising into the sky in the distance and the collision with the huge Luffy like a warship. Crick's eyes widened, his pupils shrunk into a dot, and his mouth was stretched out like a dislocated mouth. That. What kind of monster is that? Is it possible for a human to slash the sea apart with that kind of blow? And that fist is bigger than my ship, are they really human? Agent's forehead was covered with cold sweat, his pupils were trembling, and his body was shaking. Is this the real strength of the Hawkeye man? So he was just kidding when he chopped down 50 of our ships. Is that the real strength of the Grand Line? Then what are we? Jin held his head in fear and began to doubt his life. Usopp's eyes popped out like a spring, his chin dropped to the ground, his thighs, body, and even his tongue were trembling. Good. What a horrible battle. I feel like I have suddenly contracted a disease that will kill me if I go to the Grand Line. When Sanji saw this scene, the cigarette butt in his mouth fell out of his mouth when he fainted, and his curly eyebrows kept jumping up and down. Luffy. Is he that strong? He can even hold his own against the Hawkeye man who is known as the best swordsman in the world. Zoro was deeply shocked as he looked at the sea that was split by Hawkeye's sword. Me and the world's first. Is there still such a big gap? The next second, he clenched his fists tightly, and his eyes became more determined. Yuta's eyes have been focused on Luffy, and at this time he is full of worry. Luffy, don't force yourself. She could see that this was not Hawkeye's full strength. When Hawkeye was sparring with Shanks, the collision of their slashes could even split the sky. But now it hasn't reached that level, but Luffy seems to have tried his best. After being shocked for a moment like everyone else, Zeph was the first to react and shouted to the chefs who woke up nearby. Hurry up and weigh the anchor. If we don't get away, our ship will be affected and destroyed. As soon as these words came out, everyone immediately started to act in panic. Soon, they started the Baratie and sailed away. As for Luffy, after a while of stalemate with Hawkeye's slash, he suddenly raised his hand and threw his weakened slash into the sky. You have an incredible comprehension, and through personal combat experience, your armament haki has been strengthened. This time, Luffy's armament haki was greatly enhanced, and he could clearly feel that his armament haki had been improved again. But for now, he didn't plan to continue using this form. The content of armament haki in his body was almost consumed. Next, it was time to improve his observation haki. Although Luffy was tired, he was in a very happy mood. Hawkeye was confused by this scene. He didn't understand why Luffy was so happy, even though he hadn't caused him any harm. At this time, Luffy's body shape suddenly began to change rapidly. At the same time, a large amount of auspicious cloud-like mist from sweat evaporated, completely burying his body. After a moment of change, the white, auspicious cloud seemed to have transformed into the head of a king snake, revealing two sharp fangs. As the auspicious cloud dissipated, Luffy's figure also appeared. The body is taller than the normal form, but the arms and legs are completely covered in black and red, like the giant fourth gear, and the face still has a hint of evil. The hair is like a Saiyan, all standing up, swaying and dancing. Fourth gear, Snake Man form. Looking at Luffy who changed his fighting posture, Hawkeye couldn't help but feel a little curious. What is it this time? Hawkeye secretly marveled at the convenience of Luffy's devil fruit for all his strange fighting postures and methods. But what impressed him the most was Luffy's constantly improving strength during the fight. He had never seen anyone with this kind of talent, getting stronger and stronger. Just like Zoro, who made him feel strange before, but the gap between Zoro and him was too big, so this feeling was not obvious. But when it came to Luffy, the speed of his becoming stronger that was visible to the naked eye made him worry. If Luffy had enough physical strength and enough domineering in this battle, it is very likely that he, Hawkeye, would be defeated. Just as he was thinking about this, he suddenly heard Luffy speak. Rubber King Cobra. The next moment, Luffy's fist retracted into his body like a compressed spring, and then suddenly exploded and shot out like a bullet. What surprised Hawkeye was that this attack method, which was similar to the previous gigantic attack, was incredibly fast. Even he could hardly catch it with the naked eye. Hawkeye immediately activated his observation haki and predicted Luffy's attack route. The next moment, he turned around and swung his sword in a certain direction. However, what surprised him again was that the attack he predicted suddenly changed its route and switched to other directions. Hawkeye once again relied on his observation haki to predict and swung the sword in a certain direction. And the expected attack route changed again. So that's it, armament haki can't hurt me, so you plan to rely on observation haki to attack me. Hawkeye thought so in his heart. In fact, at this time, Luffy was just secretly happy in his heart. Your comprehension is extraordinary. Through personal combat experience, your observation haki has been strengthened. Every time Luffy fights with Hawkeye's observation haki, his observation haki can be improved. With the continuous improvement of his observation haki, Luffy's attack frequency is getting faster and faster. The black and red arm turned rapidly in the air, constantly attacking Hawkeye. From the perspective of the people on Baratie, who were already some distance away at this moment, they saw a black and red arm like a black snake, constantly changing and twisting in the air at a dazzling attack speed. It seemed to be woven around Hawkeye into an extremely huge and intricate giant net. Sanji was stunned and couldn't help but sigh. Such a fast attack, it actually made Hawkeye only able to defend. Zephu stared at the dazzling battle in a daze, but in his heart he was thinking. The Straw Hat Boy. He must take Sanji away. If Sanji follows him, he won't be buried. Usopp was surprised and cheered for Luffy. Sigui. Luffy. Defeat that Hawkeye. Zoro shook his head when he heard Usopp's words. Such an attack alone cannot defeat Hawkeye. Although Hawkeye is now being attacked by an extremely fast and changing attack, he can only defend himself. But if he wanted to break through, he only needed to take Luffy's punch and then swing his sword at Luffy, and the situation would quickly turn around. That man didn't want to defeat Luffy at all, he just didn't want to be attacked by Luffy. Yuta also nodded silently, agreeing with Zoro's judgment. But she continued with Zoro's words and said, but when Luffy's observation haki is improved to be one step ahead of Hawkeye, the scene you mentioned will happen. If Luffy's observation haki predicts Hawkeye's movements first and attacks in advance, so that Hawkeye has no time to predict the defense, then the latter will have to break the situation by attacking. Luffy and Hawkeye's offense and defense are still going on. Because he has been competing with the opponent in observation haki, Luffy's domineering is consumed very quickly. But at the same time, the speed of improvement is also very fast. At this moment, Luffy suddenly saw it in his mind. Hawkeye, who had been dodging defense, suddenly stopped, clenched the black knife, and slashed at him fiercely. At the moment when Hawkeye swung the slash, his fist finally attacked Hawkeye and knocked him away. But he himself was also slashed by Hawkeye and was seriously injured. Foresee the future. Luffy thought to himself, and realized what was going on in an instant. At the same time, he immediately stopped chasing Hawkeye and retracted his fist. Although it was cool to hit Hawkeye with a punch, he didn't want to be stabbed, especially by Hawkeye. Not worth it. It just so happened that his observation haki was almost consumed, and he had reached the level of foreseeing the future, so there was no need to hurt Hawkeye. At the same time, Hawkeye had already clearly noticed that Luffy's attack route was becoming more and more difficult for him to predict. Just when he was unsure and was about to hurt Luffy, he found that Luffy had stopped attacking. Hawkeye frowned and muttered in confusion. Are you out of energy? Or, Hawkeye had a shocking idea in his mind. Could it be that he had foreseen the future? At this moment, Luffy released the fourth gear form. The consumption of his armament haki and observation haki made him feel exhausted instantly. He lay powerlessly on the deck, gasping for breath. Seeing this scene, Hawkeye secretly breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that Luffy was out of strength, not that he had reached the level of foreseeing the future. Otherwise, this terrifying speed of improvement would make him doubt himself. Even though he was the world's greatest swordsman, he did not have such a perverted speed of improvement as Luffy. You are so cruel. You actually planned to use such a heavy hand on me. Suddenly, Luffy, who was lying on the ground, complained. Hawkeye's pupils trembled when he heard it, as if he was stabbed by someone, and he was secretly shocked. It really is. Can you foresee the future? However, Hawkeye remained as indifferent as ever and said calmly. I just want to make you lose your ability to fight, not to kill you. Hawkeye began to put the black knife back to his back. Redhead is right. You really gave me a lot of surprises. With your talent, one day you will surely grow into a top powerhouse. You no longer have the ability to fight, so this battle ends here. I will tell the redhead about your growth. I hope that when we meet again next time, you will have grown up enough to let me fight with all my strength for the world's #1 swordsman. After saying this, Hawkeye turned around and was about to leave. But at this moment, he suddenly heard Luffy lying on the ground say. Wait. Who said I? No fighting ability. Wait. Who said I? No ability to fight anymore. Luffy suddenly said this from behind. Hawkeye turned back in confusion and looked at Luffy. Your domineering spirit has almost been exhausted, and your body has almost reached its limit. How can you fight like this? Luffy suddenly grinned and said. In a domineering way, didn't you say that I was born to be a king? I haven't used it yet, right? The domineering aura of the king. Hawkeye's body trembled when he heard this, and his pupils trembled. Then he fixed his eyes, and said with a little disbelief in his eyes. Could it be that? Have you mastered the Conqueror's Haki? The threat of Conqueror's Haki alone would definitely not affect him at all. Since Luffy said he hadn't used Conqueror's Haki yet, it must be the Conqueror's Haki. But this is what shocked Hawkeye. Conqueror's Haki is the most powerful force in the world. There are only a handful of people who can master it, and each of them is undoubtedly a world-famous figure. And now, in the small East China Sea, the other party was a person who had just set sail and had not even entered the Grand Line, but he had already mastered the world's top power. How could Hawkeye not be shocked? Luffy suddenly grinned and said calmly. I learned that ability when I was 7 years old. Quote exclamation mark exclamation mark exclamation mark quote. Boom. Hawkeye's heart seemed to be struck by lightning. 7 years old. At the age of 7, he already mastered the world's top power. Such talent. So terrifying. At this moment, even though Hawkeye, the world's #1 swordsman, was shocked by Luffy. If Luffy is given more time to grow, his future will be immeasurable. However, Hawkeye still felt a little confused. He looked at Luffy strangely and asked. Since you can use the Conqueror's Haki entanglement, why didn't you use it just now? Now your body can no longer support you to continue fighting. You said you still have the ability to fight, what does that mean? Hawkeye's pupils suddenly trembled as soon as he finished speaking, and he looked at Luffy in disbelief. He saw that Luffy, who seemed to have lost his strength, suddenly burst out with a strong energy. It was as if some kind of restriction was broken, making his potential erupt like a volcano in an instant. Hawkeye looked at this scene in shock, his eyes full of disbelief. What kind of ability is this? He has been sailing on the sea for many years and has seen a lot, but he has never seen or even heard of this kind of strange ability that can break limitations and release potential. Luffy only opened the first door of the 8 gates. Open the door, remove the restrictions on the brain, exert 100% of the physical ability, consume excessive energy to increase attack and speed. Then, relying on all the remaining physical strength, he climbed up from the deck. Then, the second rest door, open. Rest gate. Remove the limit of physical fatigue, overload and squeeze the body's energy to restore physical strength, and at the same time offset the fatigue caused by the energy consumption rate of opening the gate. In short, Luffy can now use the released energy, that is, Haki, to restore all physical strength and relieve fatigue. In just a moment, Hawkeye was extremely shocked to find that Luffy, who had almost lost his ability to move, was revived with full blood in an instant, as if he had returned to his peak state. However, Hawkeye has not recovered from this shock, his pupils suddenly dilated, and his heart is like an earthquake. The third life gate, open. Life gate, further improves attack and speed, the body begins to become red with blood, and the body begins to emit green energy, steam produced by evaporating sweat. Luffy's skin began to turn blood red, and a green mist seemed to spurt out of his body. The mist surged upward, like a sharp needle, wrapping Luffy's entire body. However, what shocked Hawkeye the most was that after Luffy entered this state, the power he showed had surpassed the peak he had shown before. Is there such an incredible ability? Although Hawkeye didn't understand how Luffy did it, he was shocked. The people on Baratie were stunned when they saw this scene. Crick had fallen into the sea after Hawkeye split the giant ship. He didn't know when he secretly climbed onto Baratie with Akin. Seeing the power displayed by Luffy at this time, his jaw was stretched longer and longer as if dislocated, and his pupils, which had shrunk to a point, kept trembling. Is that monster really human? It was defeated, but it could still stand up and even looked stronger. Jin was also shocked by Hawkeye and became deeply shocked by Luffy. I remember that Straw Hat Kid was a pirate who had just set out to sea. How could a rookie pirate be so strong as a monster? Then how could our pirate group, which was known as the Overlord of the East China Sea? What is it? Akin once again held his head and doubted his life. Zeph, who had always been calm, was deeply shocked by Luffy at this moment. This Straw Hat Boy gave him too many surprises. Straw Hat Boy, I will definitely chase Sanji away and make him follow you. Sanji's eyebrows trembled up and down so fast that he could even create a phantom, and he whispered in a trembling voice. Road. Luffy, he hasn't used his full strength yet. Isn't that exaggerated power just now the peak? Usopp's fear of Hawkeye has been gradually dispelled by the power displayed by Luffy, and now he is completely immersed in the shock of Luffy. Luffy. Has it become so strong? He even invited me to be his sniper. That guy. Usopp silently clenched his fists and made up his mind to become stronger and live up to Luffy's expectations. Zoro was determined to become stronger, and after seeing Luffy's strength, he became more determined to become stronger. Luffy, I will definitely grow up to be qualified to be the swordsman of your pirate group. Among these people, only Yuta has seen Luffy's 8 gates, but only Yuta knows how much damage Luffy will cause to his body after using the 8 gates, so at this moment she did not show too much shock, but more worried, murmuring Luffy's name. Luffy. Luffy and Hawkeye. Hawkeye was already extremely shocked by Luffy opening 3 gates in a row. However, his shock continued to be raised to an unprecedented level. The 4th wound gate, the 5th gate of defense, and the 6th gate of scenery were opened one after another. Then, Luffy suddenly gathered his momentum and shouted. The 7th door of surprise, open. The 7th shocking gate, open. Luffy shouted. In an instant, the green mist that was originally gushing out was covered and swallowed by the more surging blue. The blue mist was like a blue beast, surging and shredding the boat under Luffy's feet. Countless pieces of wood were blown away by the steaming mist wrapped around Luffy's body, and then they were torn into powder by the blue beast and disappeared. Luffy, who had lost his foothold, did not fall into the sea. Instead, the surging energy dispersed the sea water, as if forming an airtight energy shield that isolated him from the sea water. Standing on the sea surface together, the dispersed and isolated sea water became turbulent under the surging energy. It was as if there was an invisible terrifying monster in the sea, constantly stirring the sea. In a flash, the sea within a few kilometers became like countless sea beasts roaring and making chaos, turning the entire sea upside down, and the scene was extremely terrifying. Luffy, the initiator of this change, now has an unparalleled peak in momentum. The energy that erupted from him even made Hawkeye afraid. At this moment, Hawkeye finally became nervous. It's really surprising. Hawkeye sighed from the bottom of his heart, and then asked Luffy. What kind of ability is this? Luffy did not hide it and answered. 8 gates of ninjutsu. Anyway, no one except him could master the 8 gates of ninjutsu, and no one would know what it was even if he said it, so it didn't matter. When Hawkeye heard Luffy's words, he caught a key piece of information. 8 gates. Hawkeye muttered, and then said. I remember the last time you mentioned was the 7th door. In other words, aren't you at your peak right now? Hawkeye's heart was shaken again. Facing Luffy now, he already felt it was particularly difficult. If Luffy were to open the 8th gate, he thought he would most likely fail. Well, I can't open the 8th gate yet, so I'm already at the peak now. Luffy didn't hide it from Hawkeye. In fact, there was no need to hide it. Hawkeye would be able to judge it himself when the two of them fought later. But even so, Hawkeye was still deeply shocked. Even if Luffy hasn't opened the 8th gate yet, it means that his strength still has room for improvement. And Luffy also has the ability of the Devil Fruit. If the Devil Fruit awakens again and his domineering power is improved, Hawkeye could no longer imagine what kind of monster would be born in this world at that time. Monkey D. Luffy, you have the power to change the world. Hawkeye praised sincerely. Luffy did not deny this and said, come on. Let's decide the outcome with one move. Maintaining this state consumes a lot of energy, so Luffy doesn't want to waste time. Hawkeye heard this and said no more, and drew out the black sword again. Monkey D. Luffy, let me see your full power now. Hawkeye said, and Luffy's arms were covered in black in an instant. The next second, terrifying purple-black lightning suddenly shot out from Luffy's arms like a laser, and spread rapidly to the surroundings. In the blink of an eye, it seemed as if the sky and the earth changed color. With Luffy as the center, the area within several kilometers became dark. At this time, a translucent purple-black ball of light seemed to form on Luffy's arms. The ball of light exuded unparalleled amazing energy, like a prehistoric beast, and seemed to have the power to devour everything. Then, Luffy gathered the ball of light wrapped in surging energy in front of his abdomen. The two energies came into contact and began to merge into one, forming a round ball of light. After the fusion, the ball of light seemed to have really turned into a prehistoric beast, and began to frantically absorb, devour and fuse the black lightning between heaven and earth. Moreover, all the energy gathered together was constantly compressed, and the ball of light became smaller and darker, until it even turned into an extremely black ball, only slightly larger than a fist, covering Luffy's right fist. This was a new skill derived from Luffy's extraordinary comprehension, the skill Daytime Tiger that he was able to master after opening the seventh gate, Domineering Daytime Tiger. Day Tiger is an air cannon that compresses the air and then releases it in one breath. It is shaped like a tiger and has amazing power. Because the King's Haki entanglement cannot be released like an air cannon, Luffy derived Hao-Chan Day Tiger. The principle is to fuse and compress the King's Haki released by Luffy just like Day Tiger compresses the air. All the energy can be released in one breath at the moment of release, greatly enhancing the power. Moreover, there is a key point in this skill. While compressing the King's Haki, the air is also compressed. After Luffy completely releases the compressed King's Haki, the air cannon Day Tiger will be released next, causing the second stage of damage. At the moment when Luffy completed the charging of Hao-Chan Day Tiger, the sky and the earth returned to light again, and the blue mist around Luffy became much weaker, and everything seemed to return to calm. Except for the right fist shrouded in pure black that Luffy placed on his abdomen. Hawkeye's eyes were fixed on Luffy's right fist at this moment. He felt a great crisis from it. At this moment, Hawkeye no longer held back. He did not dare to hold back. He stood sideways, holding the black knife horizontally, and placed it in front of his chest. At the same time, a shocking energy suddenly gushed out of his body. On his black knife, streams of green air formed like a ring of air, floating from his hands holding the knife to the tip of the knife. As the air ring spread out, the entire atmosphere seemed to be twisted and vibrated, making a series of humming sounds. Seeing this tense scene, the people on Baratie held their breath unconsciously and concentrated their attention. Come on! Hawkeye shouted, and his body shape changed, making a chopping posture. At this moment, Luffy also shouted, raised his right fist, jumped up, and rushed towards Hawkeye. Boom! With a roar, the sky was dark. Boom! When Luffy and Hawkeye were fighting, the world seemed to be shaken. The huge roar was like thunder, resounding through the sky. And Luffy's domineering aura condensed on his right fist also suddenly erupted in an instant. The terrifying purple-black lightning was like several winding dragons, crackling and spreading around. In the blink of an eye, the world was shrouded in darkness again. On Hawkeye's side, he saw that his black knife blade seemed to be covered with a layer of green air like a ghost fire. Circles of air rings continued to spread outward from the blade, making the space distorted. One side of the two was covered by the terrifying purple-black lightning, and the other side was covered by the surging green air like a ghost fire. From a distance, it was like a huge purple-black light ball like a mountain, wrapped in lightning, and a ghost fire green light ball with air rings spreading out, in a fierce collision that shook the world. Surging and amazing energy burst out from the collision. The air currents that were stirred up spread all the way to the sea where the edge could not be seen, stirring up the entire sea. What was even more terrifying was that in the gap between the two light balls, the sea began to cut along that line. It was as if two invisible forces tore the entire sea apart from different directions on both sides, splitting it into two. In the middle, a bottomless black abyss was formed, the abyss was boundless, and there was no end in sight. The sea water above the two seas fell into the abyss like a flood. At the same time, above the corresponding sky, black clouds rolled, like a rushing and steaming sea of clouds, and were also split into two by two invisible forces, slowly spreading to both sides. And the rushing and steaming sea of clouds, like the sea water below, rushed madly towards the crack. Seeing this earth-shaking scene, everyone on Baratie was dumbfounded. After arriving at Baratie, Click's eyeballs were about to explode in shock, and at this moment they were stained with blood, and it seemed to be on the verge of exploding. He spoke shocking words in a trembling and hoarse voice. Sky. Sky and big. The sea is actually. They were separated. What kind of monsters are they? Am I fighting humans? After being hit by Hawkeye and Luffy to the point of doubting his life, Jin was once again hit into the bottomless abyss. Is this really a rookie pirate? Is this really the strength of a pirate? Are we really considered pirates? Sanji's eyebrows were twitching so much that he was about to have a cramp, and his mouth had never closed from the beginning to now. Compared to them, I am nothing but trash. Usopp was once again deeply shocked, his tongue and his whole body trembled. Sky. The sky and the sea are separated. Is that what it means to be a true sea warrior? Will I have to fight monsters like this in the future? I seem to have a disease that will kill me at sea. Zoro was so shocked that he kept making sounds in his throat, and he was so excited that he trembled and said, "That rascal. Can it be done to this extent? Still a long way to go." This was the first time Yuta saw Luffy going all out. She didn't expect Luffy to be so strong. She muttered to herself. Cutting through the sky and the sea, it's just like when Hawkeye and Shanks were fighting. Luffy, you are already so strong. Just when everyone was shocked and exclaimed, Zeph's exclamation suddenly rang out. Hurry up and fold the sails, or we will fall into the seabed crack along with the ship. Zeph's exclamation immediately brought everyone back to their senses. Then everyone saw that the Baratie was following the madly rushing sea water and flowing towards the bottomless abyss in front of it that was cut by Luffy and Hawkeye. In an instant, everyone was shocked. Oops, I'm going to fall into that crack. It's over. I'm dead now. Help, I don't want to die yet. Just as some people began to cry for help, Zefu shouted again. There are fixed oars by the fence, everyone hurry up and row together. Although it's a drop in the bucket, we can hold on for a while. All the people who can move immediately ran to the side of the boat and used the huge oars to row in the opposite direction. As for Luffy and Hawkeye, after the fierce collision, the sky and the sea were torn apart. Hawkeye also marveled at Luffy's strength from the bottom of his heart. Monkey D. Luffy. You really surprise me again and again. You were originally much weaker than me, but now you can burst out with strength that rivals mine. Your ability is to release your domineering aura all at once, so that it can burst out with maximum power instantly. This means that you don't have the sustained power to maintain this outburst. What a shame, Straw Hat Boy. If your conqueror's haki was more domineering and more abundant, I might be the one who loses this competition. But now, the winner has been decided. Hawkeye had just finished speaking when he saw Luffy smile strangely. The next moment, his expression suddenly changed. He saw a ball of white air suddenly burst out from Luffy's right fist, which was wrapped in purple-black lightning, like a cannonball. The white airflow contained extremely powerful and domineering power. At the moment of eruption, it suddenly turned into a huge and domineering tiger. The explosion of the tiger tearing the air was like a tiger roar, shaking the earth. The huge energy contained in it was intertwined with the purple-black lightning. It seemed to merge into one, forming a more domineering purple-black electric tiger. Roar. The air exploded like a tiger roar, and the purple-black electric tiger suddenly burst out with unparalleled amazing power. Hawkeye was shocked, but it was too late when he reacted. In just a moment, the huge green light ball like a mountain was broken and shattered. The white tiger rushed out of the purple-black lightning, like a wild horse running wildly, with crackling purple-black lightning behind it that cut through the air. Luffy vs. Hawkeye. Luffy wins. Baratie. When everyone saw the green mist light curtain on Hawkeye's side being torn and shattered, they were shocked. Click's eyeballs turned red due to congestion, beating like a heartbeat, and were on the verge of bursting. He was shaking and shocked and couldn't even speak. That, Hawkeye man. Unexpectedly. Defeated. By that. Straw Hat Boy. Ajin looked at the huge tiger that gradually disappeared in the air in disbelief, his eyes were full of disbelief, and his heart was extremely shocked. That rookie pirate defeated the Hawkeye guy who chopped down 50 of our ships. Is he really a rookie pirate? Are all the rookies nowadays so perverted? Is it time to retire? Sanji was so shocked that he murmured. Luffy. Did he really defeat the world's best swordsman? With that kind of strength, he just went out to sea. Although Zeph was also shocked to see Luffy break through Hawkeye, he was more concerned about the crisis of Baratie before. After the two of them finished their attack, the dark scene began to brighten, the separated sky and ocean gradually began to move closer to each other, and the originally stirred-up sea gradually calmed down. Zeph couldn't help but sigh. It seems that this ship and our lives are saved. Usopp raised his arms and shouted, and his fear disappeared in an instant. Yo! Good job, Luffy. With you here, the Grand Line isn't that scary. Even the world's best swordsman lost to you. As expected, I felt you were extraordinary at first sight, and now it seems that I really have good taste. As soon as Usopp finished speaking, Zoro shook his head. No. Hawkeye is not defeated. Usopp, use your observation haki to sense and see if Hawkeye's aura is still there. He should just be injured, not defeated. Usopp immediately activated his observation haki upon hearing this, and indeed he noticed Hawkeye, who was blown into the sea and was now climbing onto a coffin board. Suddenly, Usopp returned to his autistic look again. Sure enough, I have the kind of disease that will kill me at sea. The world's #1 swordsman is too scary, the Grand Line is too scary. Yuta naturally also noticed the current situation of the battle, but she was more concerned about Luffy's safety. Because after Luffy burst out with this attack, the blue mist on his body completely dissipated, and the whole person suddenly lost all his strength. And because there was no foothold under his feet, he began to fall into the sea below. Luffy! Yuta cried out in worry, then jumped up and stepped in the air. Moon Step. This was a skill that Luffy had used his extraordinary understanding to help Yuta learn from the navy brought by Garp, and with the help of Luffy's extraordinary understanding, Yuta had practiced it to perfection. The speed was so fast that it was even comparable to teleportation. After a few instants, she was on top of Luffy's head. She pulled up Luffy, who had already sunk more than half of his body into the water, and held him in her arms and stepped into the air again to return to the Baratie. Luffy, are you okay? Yuta looked at Luffy lying in her arms with concern and asked softly. Luffy tiredly squeezed out a forced smile. I'm fine, I'm just too tired, I just need to take a rest. Ah. It hurts, it hurts. After the 8 gates were released, Luffy's skin became red as if it was burned. And because of the physical exhaustion, the slightest touch on his body would cause him extreme pain. Fortunately, he has a strong physique, plus the ability of the rubber fruit that can make him stronger, so it is not so unbearable. Sanji, can you make me something to eat? I'm so hungry. Luffy said weakly. This consumption almost drained him dry, and he felt extremely hungry after returning to normal. Upon hearing this, Sanji immediately turned around and walked towards the restaurant of Baratie. Wait a moment. At this moment, Hawkeye, who had been knocked away before, stood on his coffin board and floated over. Luffy turned his head with difficulty. He saw that Hawkeye had blood on the corner of his mouth, his complexion was a little worse than before, and his clothes were torn on his chest. It seemed that there was a big scar on his chest. Luffy was not surprised to see Hawkeye appear. If this battle was a life-and-death battle, he would definitely be the loser. It was indeed as Hawkeye said, his attack was only a momentary burst, and the stamina was insufficient and could not be maintained. So once the opponent held on for that moment, it was equivalent to breaking this move. But what Hawkeye didn't expect was that Luffy's move had a hidden secret, which triggered a second attack. This made Hawkeye fail to react and suffer a loss at Luffy's hands. If Hawkeye had known about Luffy's move in advance, he would have probably taken other countermeasures. But although something unexpected happened to Hawkeye, his strength is there after all. Even though his resistance was defeated by Luffy in an instant, he used his powerful armament haki to protect his body so as not to be defeated by a single blow. Looking at Luffy lying there, exhausted, Hawkeye's eyes were filled with mixed emotions. Suffering a loss from a young boy who had just gone to sea was somewhat embarrassing for him as the world's #1 swordsman. So there was a hint of embarrassment and anger in his eyes. But more of it was appreciation and admiration for Luffy. He had already stumbled just after going to sea, so his future would be limitless after he grows up. Monkey D. Luffy, I will remember you. I will always keep an eye on you. I am looking forward to seeing what kind of changes you will bring to this world. After leaving these words, Hawkeye turned the coffin lid around and drove away. After Hawkeye's figure gradually disappeared, a clown suddenly jumped out. Ha 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 ha. That monster is gone, this monster can't move, this ship belongs to me, all of you go to hell. Suddenly, Click jumped in front of everyone, and the clothes he was wearing suddenly burst open, revealing the golden armor inside. He laughed and aimed his gun at everyone. Suddenly, everyone present felt a strong killing intent. Then, a low and angry voice sounded. You idiot, be quiet for a moment. After saying that, Yuta gently put Luffy down, then suddenly dodged and kicked the golden armor on Click's chest. Boom. In an instant, the armor shattered and exploded, and Click's figure flew hundreds of meters away and fell into the sea. This scene made everyone present stunned again. Click, the overlord of the East China Sea, was solved so easily. At this moment, everyone had only one thought in their mind. This Straw Hat Pirates is too scary. Ah woo woo woo. Ah woo woo woo. Luffy was lying in Yuta's arms, eating the food that Yuta fed him, feeling happy. As he was eating, his ability of extreme digestion was activated. The nutrients in the food he ate were instantly absorbed, and his physical strength and physique were gradually recovering and strengthening. And his skin, which seemed to be burned, was also beginning to recover and heal itself. After a delicious meal, Luffy and others asked Zeph for a small boat. They still had to bring Nami back. Before leaving, Luffy looked at Sanji standing on the deck of Baratie and said, "Sanji, come with us." Sanji was stunned and hesitated. After seeing the power displayed by Luffy, he felt like a frog in a well, with very little knowledge of the world. He wanted to go out to sea with Luffy to find the legendary All Blue. But he couldn't help but look back at Zeph. "What do you want, you little brat? Get out of here now." Zeph kicked Sanji and flew him onto Luffy's boat. Usopp caught him and threw the luggage he had packed for Sanji over to him. "Stinky old man." Sanji gritted his teeth and groaned angrily. Suddenly, he fell to his knees, tears welling up in his eyes. "Old man Zeph." Sanji cried and yelled, then knocked his head down hard. "For so long. Thank you for your care. This kindness, I will never forget it." Baratie comes on stage. Zeph, Patty and other chefs all have tears in their eyes. "Asshole. I'll be lonely when you're gone. Me too. I am so sad." On the boat, Sanji cried and looked up at the familiar people on the other side and said, "Goodbye, everyone." At the same time, Luffy shouted, "Sail." When Luffy and his crew chased after Nami, Luffy finally relaxed and began to rest. Only after a full rest, the ability of extreme enhancement will be activated. Luffy is full of expectations for how much he will grow by then. Your comprehension is extraordinary. Through extreme enhancement, your physique is strengthened. You have an incredible comprehension. Through ultimate enhancement, your observation haki is enhanced. You have an incredible comprehension. Through ultimate enhancement, your armament haki is enhanced. Your comprehension is extraordinary. Your unique skill, 8 Gates of Dunjia, has achieved a breakthrough, and you can open the 8th gate, the Death Gate. Your overall strength has achieved a breakthrough. After waking up again, a large amount of information flooded into Luffy's mind. When he sorted out the improvement he had gained, Luffy was immediately delighted. This extreme battle brought him a huge improvement. Not only did he successfully break through the 8th gate of the 8 gates of ninjutsu, but he also made his strength advance to another level. Now Luffy, without opening the 8 gates of ninjutsu, has reached the level of a candidate for admiral. And Luffy can strongly feel that this time the strength advancement is not just reaching the advancement threshold. Instead, it has crossed a large gap. The gap to the admiral is very small. Luffy is confident if his conqueror's haki can be improved a little more, so that his top fighting style can be strengthened, even if the fruit is not awakened, he can reach the strength of an admiral. But now, with the 8 gates of ninjutsu activated, he is already strong enough to fight against the admiral. His ultimate move is Ha-chan Daehu, which is enough to surpass the strongest attack of top strongmen like Hawkeye. For normal attacks, he has Ryu Sakura, after the armament haki is strengthened when the 8 gates of ninjutsu is activated, which is enough to surpass the armament haki of anyone today. Except for the fast consumption and limited maintenance time, his other combat abilities are above those of an admiral. In the comment area, some brothers mentioned the problem of the setting of the 8 gates. I later saw the official explanation on the encyclopedia, which said that this ability is mainly to remove the body's restrictions on chakra and release the excess chakra in the body. What I understand is that, for example, if there are 100 points of chakra in the body, you can only release 30 points at a time. Then, if the restriction is lifted, you can release more, and the combat power will be increased accordingly on the basis of 30 points. If it is moved to one piece, because there are 3 kinds of domineering, the 3 kinds of domineering cannot be mixed together. So the setting I gave is that after opening the 8 gates, the observation color, armed color, and domineering color will be improved accordingly. It will not be said that all the attack methods as a whole will be improved tenfold or dozens of times at once, otherwise anyone will be killed with one move, and there is nothing to write. I hope everyone understands. Then the ultimate move Night Kai will be set to condense all the domineering and burst out. After sorting out his current abilities and strengths, Luffy slowly opened his eyes. Luffy, you're awake. As soon as he opened his eyes, Yuta's surprised voice reached Luffy's ears. Before Luffy could react, he was suddenly hugged tightly by Yuta, and big tears kept dripping on Luffy's face. Then, he heard Yuta sobbing. Woohoo! You have been sleeping for 3 days and 3 nights. I was so worried. Luffy smiled, patted Yuta's head, and said softly. I'm just a little tired, I slept a little longer, it's okay. Yuta's crying became weaker after hearing this, and suddenly remembered something, picked up a bag of dry food they prepared when they left Baratie, and handed it to Luffy. Luffy, you haven't eaten for 3 days, you must be hungry. After hearing what Yuta said, Luffy realized that his stomach was empty, and a strong sense of hunger hit him instantly. He took the dry food and ate it in big mouthfuls, squeezing out a sentence from his full mouth. Thank you. Yuta's eyes smiled and curved into crescents. He nodded slightly and watched Luffy eat quietly. By the way, Luffy, have you become stronger? At this time, Zoro, who had not yet fully recovered from his injury, suddenly asked. He felt that Luffy's aura seemed to have improved to a higher level. Luffy answered casually while eating. I can almost fight against the Admiral. Quote exclamation mark exclamation mark exclamation mark quote. As soon as these words came out, Zoro, Sanji, and Usopp were all shocked, their pupils flickered, their mouths opened wide, and they were shocked. Ocean. The Admiral. That is the Navy's highest combat power. Has he become so strong? After sighing, the 3 of them fell into silence, and secretly made up their minds that they had to work harder, otherwise they would not be worthy of being Luffy's partner. After Luffy finished eating the dry food, he looked around at the boundless sea and asked. Speaking of which, where are we now? As soon as he finished speaking, he saw a small island in a certain direction. At this time, Yuta also answered him and said. We have been sailing in the direction Nami left, she should be at the island ahead. Zoro also said at this time. When Joseph and Johnny said goodbye to us, they told me that the direction Nami was heading was a village called Kokoja village. But it was said that there was a group of fish-man pirates entrenched near this village. Luffy looked at the approaching island, clapping his fists and saying. Let's go and bring that stupid navigator back. Kokoja village, on the coast. Call. I'm finally back. Nami stretched her arm to her forehead, wiped the sweat off her forehead, and exhaled. Then she picked up a large bag of packed treasures and jumped off the Golden Mary, and walked towards the village. The village road was dilapidated, and the houses on both sides were crooked and covered with wooden patches everywhere. The whole village was empty and looked desolate and very desolate. Nami walked on the road full of traces of destruction, gritting her teeth more and more tightly. I must buy this village back from Eren. Nami was very determined. At this time, she noticed the villagers hiding in the house and secretly observing her, and she couldn't help feeling depressed. Everyone still hates me and my gang, everyone is avoiding me. But it doesn't matter, I will be able to buy this village back soon. There was an independent small house near the outskirts of Kokoja village, with orange trees growing vigorously outside the house. Nami walked through the village and walked all the way here. At this time, a woman with blue hair and slightly dark skin who was tending to the orange trees near the house suddenly heard footsteps. She walked out of the orange tree and saw Nami, and immediately rushed over, shouting in surprise. Nami, you're back. Nami smiled and hugged the woman tightly. Nojiko, I'm back. Under an orange tree near the wooden house. Nami squatted on the ground and dug up the ground, revealing a pile of shiny gold and silver treasures. Nami opened the package she brought back and poured it in. We got a lot this time. Nohigo, who was standing nearby, said as he looked at the large bag of treasure that Nami had poured in. Nami covered the treasure again and replied. Well, there are about 7 million Baileys. I still need 7 million berries. If I go out again, I can save up 100 million berries to buy the village. Nami's eyes were full of hope, and her little face, which was stained with mud, showed a happy smile. This scene made Nokiko feel sad, and his eyes were full of heartache when he looked at Nami. Go back, Nami. I'll cook for you, Nokigao said, and turned to walk towards the wooden house. Nami followed him happily and contentedly. Near the village of Kokoja, there is a territory occupied by fishmen, the Along Empire. At this moment, in the Along Empire, under a building that towers like a pagoda, the sawtooth shark fishman Along is sitting with a navy colonel with a treacherous face and a wretched rat-like appearance, Colonel Mouse. Along took out a handful of banknotes and handed them over. This is this month's money, take it. Colonel Mouse glanced at the banknotes, smiled, and said as he reached out to take it. Squeak squeak. You really know how to deal with people, so I won't be polite. Aaron laughed. Ha 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 ha. Why are you still being polite? The beautiful world is a world full of money. Money is a good thing, the most reliable thing, right? Colonel Mouse also echoed. Squeak squeak. That's right. At this time, a kissing fishman suddenly came to Aaron and whispered. Brother Along, a fishman reported that Nami is back and brought back a large bag of things. I guess it is the treasure she got this time. Along stopped laughing when he heard this, and said with a thoughtful look in his eyes, recalling the past. By the way, Nami has been with our Arlong group for 8 years. She must have saved up a lot of treasure in these 8 years, right? It should be not much different from the 100 million Baileys I promised her. As he said this, Aaron suddenly showed a strange smile and looked at Colonel Mouse who was sitting opposite him and counting the money. Colonel Mouse, I'm afraid I have to trouble you with one more thing. In the wooden house near Kokoja village, Nami and Nojiko were sitting at a wooden table, happily eating. Nami, you look different this time. Nokigao said suddenly, holding a bowl in his hand, but his eyes were always on Nami who was eating opposite him. Nami looked up in confusion and asked. Is there any difference? Nokigao nodded slightly and talked about his feelings. In the past, when you came back, you always looked very tired and in a low mood. But this time he looks very relaxed. Did something happy happen to him? Nami was stunned when she heard this. After Nohigo's reminder, she realized that she was unexpectedly relaxed this time, and her mood was not as heavy as before. She couldn't help but think of Luffy and Yuta. Suddenly, the corners of her mouth rose and she smiled slightly. This time, I met a group of strange guys. Seeing Nami like this, Nokigo's eyes lit up. This was the first time she saw Nami happy from the bottom of her heart after she joined Along's group. Putting down the bowl and chopsticks, she supported her chin with her hand and said. Hey, I say Nami. Tell me about what happened to you this time. I'm curious. Those strange guys you met. Nami thought about it and thought it would be a good idea to tell Nokigo about these interesting things, so she thought about where to start. Suddenly she thought of something, and Nami's eyes suddenly lit up, and she said excitedly. That's right. Let's start with that stupid captain. I tell you, that stupid captain. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. There was laughter in the wooden house. No one knew how long it lasted. Nokigao laughed like a silver bell and said. Ha 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 ha. Is that captain such a fool? He knows you are a treasure thief, and he invites you to be his navigator. Nami nodded repeatedly. That's right, that's right. He really is a huge idiot. At that time in Monka's office, I felt like I was going to be exposed, but that stupid captain didn't even realize that I was lying. I was so scared at that time, my heart was pounding. Ha 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 ha. Joyful laughter rang out again in the room. After a long time. Call. Nuauchi took a long breath to relieve the fatigue after laughing so hard. Nami, you like them very much, don't you? At this time, Nokigo suddenly said. Nami was stunned for a moment, then a happy smile appeared on her face and she nodded heavily. Like it very much. When I was with them, I seemed to be so happy all the time. Nami had memories in her eyes, and her mouth corners unconsciously raised, looking very happy. Nohigo saw Nami's yearning and happy look, but felt sad in her heart, and said. Nami, you don't have to live such a hard life. Just ignore our words. Bang. Nami slammed the table, supported herself on it and stood up. She looked at Nohigo angrily and said seriously. Nochigao, I don't allow you to say such things again. I will definitely liberate you in this village from Aaron. Absolutely. Nohigo was deeply moved, his eyes slightly moistened, and he murmured Nami's name. Nami. At this moment, they suddenly heard footsteps outside the door, and at the same time a somewhat obscene voice. Squeak squeak. Is anyone here? Squeak squeak. Is there anyone here? Suddenly, a voice came from outside the door. Nami and Nokigo looked at each other, both full of doubts. The two opened the door and walked out, and saw a naval colonel dressed like a mouse and a group of naval soldiers standing outside their wooden house. Nami frowned, with anger and disgust in her eyes. Eren and his gang destroyed and amassed wealth in Kokoja village and dozens of nearby villages, but the naval colonel in charge of this area never stopped them. So Nami's disgust for the mouse colonel was no less than Eren's. Nami murmured in a deep voice. What do you want? Colonel Mouse smiled obscenely, then revealed a strange smile and said. Squeak squeak. We received a report from the public that there are thieves here. He stole a lot of other people's treasure and hid it in this orange grove. Now we must take back all these ill-gotten gains according to the law. Squeak squeak. Colonel Mouse smiled obscenely again, and then gave orders to the sailors behind him. Search for me. Turn this orange orchard upside down and find the treasure. The Navy immediately planned to take action after hearing this. At this moment, Nami took out 2 iron bars from her chest and put them together to block everyone. At this time, her face was extremely gloomy, and the anger in her eyes seemed to tear everyone in front of her to pieces. She shouted in a deep voice. No one is allowed to approach. The mouse colonel saw this scene, narrowed his eyes slightly, and said with a little threat. Miss, are you going to go against our navy? As soon as the words fell, dozens of guns were aimed at Nami. Nami. Nokigo's eyes were full of worry as he called Nami's name. But Nami did not retreat at all and said in a deep voice. Did A Long ask you to come? Colonel Mouse did nothing about A Long's evil deeds. Even though Nami had never seen them trade, she could guess what was going on. Colonel Mouse pretended to be puzzled when questioned and said. Eren. What Eren? I came here because I received a report from the public. Miss, please move aside quickly, or we will be rude to you. Colonel Mouse raised his hand and all the navy loaded their guns. At this time, Nokiko panicked and rushed over immediately, hugged the distraught Nami and pulled her aside. He apologized to Colonel Mouse with a smile. I'm sorry, Colonel. My sister is ignorant, please don't bother with her. Go ahead and search. But we have nothing to do with the thief you mentioned. We don't know whether there are thieves hiding treasures here. Colonel Mouse smiled proudly, with a look of pride in his eyes. Then he waved to the navy behind him, and everyone rushed into the orange orchard. A moment later. Treasure found, Colonel Mouse. A rough estimate is that there are nearly 100 million Baileys. A report from a Navy soldier suddenly came from the orange orchard. When Colonel Mouse heard the words 100 million Baileys, his eyes widened. Eren promised to split the treasure with him 50-50, which means that he can get 50 million Baileys this time. Thinking of this number, Colonel Mouse's breathing became heavier. After suppressing the excitement in his heart, Colonel Mouse shouted the order. Take all the treasure and we retreat. Squeak squeak. Now I'm rich. The latter sentence was said secretly by Colonel Mouse, but it was still heard by Nami and Nojiko. Suddenly, the distraught Nami broke free from Nojiko's arms and rushed out. In the air, a few tears fell as she ran. Nami. Nohigo called Nami worriedly, but she didn't even turn around and soon disappeared from Nohigo's sight. Kokoja village. Hundreds of angry villagers, holding shovels, hoes, sticks and other weapons, followed a man named Aegean, who was wearing a guard uniform, with a windmill on the top of his hat and a scar on his face. Led by Aegean, they all came to the wooden house surrounded by orange trees. Looking at Nokigao, who was sitting on the ground with a worried and sad face, Aegean frowned and asked. Did those guys take away the money Nami saved to buy the village? Just now they saw a group of Navy soldiers inexplicably appear in the village, and when they left, they were carrying large and small bags with golden light inside. So, everyone followed Aegean in anger to inquire about the situation. Nokigao's eyes were dull, he just sat on the ground and nodded silently. Suddenly, all the villagers were furious and said angrily. Those Marines are so despicable, they actually took away the money Nami saved up to buy the village. That must have been the one who ordered it. They had no intention of letting Nami go. Nami has suffered for 8 years because of our village. We cannot let Nami continue to suffer. We went to fight those fishmen to free Nami. Fight them for Nami. For a moment, all the villagers held their weapons and raised their arms and shouted loudly, full of momentum. They had watched Nami living in pain for them and for this village for so many years. They didn't even dare to see Nami normally, for fear of putting pressure on her. But now, that group of fishmen went back on their words and designed to take away Nami's hope. They couldn't stand it anymore. Nokigo looked at the angry villagers and gritted her teeth. After listening to the happy things Nami said, she no longer wanted to see Nami continue to suffer. She wanted to see Nami happy. Fight with Eren and his gang. Nokigao got up from the ground angrily and joined the villagers. Kokoja village, near the coast. Oh. I see it, it's the Mary. Usopp stood at the bow, looking at the golden Mary anchored on the coast in front of him, and shouted in surprise. We are finally here. Luffy looked at the island he was about to arrive at, with a smile on his face. Wait, my stupid navigator. Kokoja village, coast, on the Mary. Great, it looks like the Mary has not been damaged. As soon as Usopp approached, he carefully checked the Mary. After finding that it was intact, he breathed a sigh of relief. That woman seems to have taken all our treasures away. Although Zoro's injuries have not yet recovered, he can still move normally. When he checked the things on the Mary, he found that only the treasure was missing. Luffy nodded after hearing the two people's report. Just as he was about to lead everyone to find Nami, he suddenly noticed that a group of people came out of the village, holding hoes, shovels, sticks and other tools in their hands. They all looked very angry. What happened to these villagers? Yuta asked. At this time, the others also noticed the angry villagers, and they came to the side of the boat and looked at them. Luffy recognized the two leaders at the first sight, they were Ajian and Nojiko. He had guessed something without seeing Nami. Let's go ask. Luffy said, then jumped off the Mary, and the others followed closely behind. The villagers also noticed Luffy and the others. When they saw Luffy and the other 5 standing in a row, blocking them, they all became alert. Who are they? Pirates. They got off the ship that Nami brought back. Could it be that Nami stole their ship and they are here to hunt her down? That would be bad. Let's help Nami drive these pirates away. While the villagers were talking about it, Nojiko suddenly noticed the straw hat on Luffy's head. Come to think of it, the stupid captain that Nami mentioned was wearing a straw hat. Look at the people standing next to the straw hat man. A beautiful girl with fashionable clothes and cute looks. A man with green algae hair holding 3 knives. Huh. Why is there only 1 knife? A long nose. And a pair of curly eyebrows that Nami didn't mention. Although there are a few small differences, it seems that this group of people is the strange pirate group that Nami mentioned. After determining the identity of the visitor, Nojiko immediately greeted Luffy with surprise. You are Nami's stupid captain, right? Luffy was still thinking about how to make the villagers believe that they were not bad people, when he heard Nojiko on the other side suddenly shouted in surprise. He was stunned for a moment, and then smiled. Stupid captain. Is that what that stupid navigator said about me? Nohigo immediately realized that he had said the wrong thing. He was so excited that he called Nami a sarcastic name. He immediately waved his hands nervously and said, No. Nami didn't say that. It was me just now. Just as Nokiko was thinking about how to explain, he saw Luffy smiled and said without any concern. It's okay. Nohigo was stunned. In her impression, pirates were all evil and cruel. But the pirate in front of her seemed to be very easygoing. She couldn't help but recall what Nami told her about Luffy and others. She smiled and sighed in her heart. Nami, you are right. They are really a group of strange guys. At this time, Ajian, who had been watching from the side, suddenly asked. Nokigao, do you know them? Nokigao's thoughts were pulled back by Ajian, and then he shook his head and answered. No, it's the first time I see them too. I heard about them from Nami. Nohigao turned around and faced everyone, saying seriously. Ajian, everyone, they are a good group of pirates. Nami. I really like this group of people. After hearing what Nokigao said, Ajian and the villagers immediately let down their guard. They would never hurt the people Nami liked. Are you Nokiko? Luffy suddenly asked. Nokiko turned around and heard Luffy continue. I am Monk D. Luffy as Nami's captain. That stupid navigator actually left us all alone without my consent. As long as I don't agree, she will always be my navigator. Now we have to go get her back. Nokiko, do you know where she is? Nokiko was touched and thankful when he heard Luffy's words. Nami, you met a group of good friends. After collecting his thoughts, Nojiko's eyes suddenly became angry, and he told Luffy and the others about Nami's experience. After a long time, that fishman, how dare he bully my navigator like this? Luffy said in a low voice, with an angry look on his face. He lowered the brim of his hat, and the shadow covered his eyes, making it difficult to see his vision. He said in a deep voice. Let's go. Go beat up those fish men and bring back my stupid navigator. Yuta, Zoro, Usopp, and Sanji all looked gloomy and whispered at the same time. Oh. X4. Seeing this scene, Nuauchi Gao, Aegean and other villagers were all panicked, their eyes full of worry, and they persuaded. No, Eren and the others are fishmen. The strength of fishmen is 10 times that of us humans. It's too dangerous for you to go like this. That's right, there are only 5 of you and the other side has dozens of fishmen, the gap in strength is too big. We know you treat Nami well, but Nami is suffering because of us. We just need to try our best to rescue Nami, you don't have to die with us. Yes, Luffy. Thank you on behalf of Nami. But this time it is too dangerous, you should not get involved. If Nami sees you, whom she likes, being killed by Arlong and his gang, she will be very sad. Nohigo cried and pulled Luffy's arm, trying to prevent the tragedy in her mind from happening. But Luffy pulled his arm out of her hand and said angrily. I can deal with that kind of stuff with just a flick of my finger. Nochigo, lead the way. On a forest path. Eren. 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 A beautiful figure was running wildly on this forest trail, repeating the word, along, in an extremely angry and resentful tone. She clenched her teeth, with 2 long tear marks on her face. The tears that kept flowing from the corners of her eyes were blown behind her by the wind as she ran. The middle of her pupils had turned pale because of extreme anger, as if she had lost focus. Do you want me to give the village back so badly, little girl? All right. Gather up 100 million Baileys and bring them to me. In that case, I will liberate the village and give you freedom, really. It doesn't matter how many years it takes, I will keep my promise. Her mind kept recalling the scene when Eren promised her. Just when she was about to achieve this goal, the money she had saved for 8 years was taken away so casually. That promise was as worthless as waste paper in the toilet. And she herself looked so naive and stupid. Thinking of all this, Nami's anger was ignited to the extreme. When she saw the entrance of a building as tall as a pagoda in front of her, Nami's suppressed anger completely broke out at this moment, and she let out a hysterical roar that resounded through the sky. Eren. In the Eren Empire. Eren was sitting by the swimming pool, enjoying a good drink and a sunbath. Suddenly, he heard a roar that shook the sky. He turned his head and saw the woman with clenched fists and a horribly gloomy face, walking towards him step by step with extremely heavy steps. Eren's mouth curled up, his eyes were playful, and he pretended to be puzzled. Oh, what happened? My excellent surveyor. His face changed. Nami lowered her head, walked step by step to Eren, and whispered. It's you. Suddenly, Nami raised her head sharply, staring at Eren fiercely with eyes that lost their focus due to anger, and said angrily. Quote. You ordered those Navy officers to steal my money, didn't you? Looking at the fishman in front of her with a smile on his face and a subtle expression, Nami suddenly burst out with tears pouring out of her eyes like a spring. She grabbed Arlong's collar with both hands, pulling and shaking him madly, crying and asking angrily. What exactly is going on? Didn't you say you would swear to abide by the agreement based on money? Eren glanced at Nami beside him, showing a puzzled and innocent look, and asked doubtfully. Comply. When did I break the agreement between us? Nami continued to tear at Arlong's collar and responded angrily. Come on, you let those Marines take my money. Quote. Nami was halfway through her words when her face was suddenly pinched tightly by Eren's huge fishman hand, leaving her unable to say a word. At this moment, she saw Eren's brows suddenly frown, his eyes instantly filled with bloodshot because of anger, and he asked in a deep voice with a mouth full of sharp fangs like saw teeth. When will I broke the agreement? Tell me what you want to say. Nami's eyes were filled with fear and anger, but she was held in Aaron's strong hands like iron pliers, unable to resist or respond. Ha 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 ha. Aaron laughed up to the sky, and changed his hand from Nami's face, which was being manipulated at will, to her neck. The agreement between him and Nami was to buy the village with 100 million berries. Nami gave him the money, and he liberated the village. This was the agreement. He refused to acknowledge anything else. Aaron continued to act innocent and said, "You said the Navy took your money. That's really bad luck. But a promise is a promise. If you don't prepare 100 million berries in front of me, I can't return the village." Ha 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 ha. Arlong laughed loudly again. Nami, who was being strangled by Arlong, was powerless to resist. The tears on her face had never dried since just now. Looking at Arlong, who was laughing loudly as if he was in control of everything, Nami could only curse helplessly and sadly. Despicable. Shameless. Aaron didn't mind Nami's weak abuse and laughed. Ha 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 ha. It's just 100 million Baileys. Why don't you save it up again? Suddenly, Aaron put away his smile, turned his head to look at Nami, grabbed her collar and lifted her up. His expression was angry, and said in a threatening tone. Or, you want to escape from here. But don't forget, by then, all the villagers in Kokoja village will all died because of you. When Nami heard Aaron mention the villagers of Kokoja village, she suddenly remembered something. When she was having dinner with Nohigo, she mentioned that the villagers still hated her and were unwilling to approach her. At that time, Nohigo's expression was very conflicted, and finally he couldn't bear to see her misunderstanding all the time, so he told her that the villagers had long known that she had saved money to buy the village. People didn't want to approach her just because they didn't want her to know and put pressure on her. And now, she came to the Aaron Empire alone to find Aaron, and the villagers must have known about it. In this case, will everyone be excited and do something impulsive? The more Nami thought about it, the more worried she became. The villagers could never be the opponents of Aaron and his gang. She had to go back quickly to stop everyone. Nami forcefully pushed away Aaron's hand that was holding her collar, and then ran out of the Aaron Empire without looking back. Nochigao, Aegean, everyone, please don't be impulsive. Don't die, or everything will be over. Isn't it just 100 million Baileys? I can save more. If everyone dies, then it's really over. Nami cried and shouted in her heart, praying that the villagers must not act rashly. However, what made her heart suddenly sink like a stone was that she saw a large group of villagers holding shovels and sticks at the entrance of the Arlong Empire. Nami panicked immediately. If the villagers broke in, everything would be over. She immediately raised her arm, wiped the tears from her eyes, and then forced a sunny and happy smile. She quickly walked to the group of people and said in a relaxed tone. Wait a minute everyone. Wait a little longer, I'll try again. Whoosh. It's not difficult to save 100 million Baileys. I already have a lot of experience. This time, I will definitely be able to save enough money quickly. By then, the village and everyone will. Before she could even utter the word, liberation, Nami was startled and saw the familiar straw hat behind Nohigo. Nami. A voice so low that it seemed to suffocate people was heard. Then, Nami saw the straw hat behind Nohigo slowly move and come to her. Nami stared at the familiar man in front of her in a daze, and then saw the other party raised his hand and wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. In an instant, Nami's grievances seemed to be suddenly suppressed, and tears burst out of her eyes like a spring. Her body, which pretended to be strong, seemed to have completely lost its strength at this moment, and the whole person softened and squatted on the ground. She looked up at the face standing in the sun, but was covered by the straw hat so that it could not be seen clearly, and said in an extremely helpless and begging voice, choking. Road. Luffy. Save me. As soon as Nami finished speaking, she felt a shadow coming towards her. The next moment, she felt someone pressing down on her head and putting a straw hat on her. Nami felt the slightly rough hat on her head, and her heart was startled. She remembered that when she was with Luffy, she heard Luffy say that this hat was very important, and that he didn't even allow others to touch it easily. But now, Luffy handed her his most important straw hat. At this moment, Nami felt extremely warm and moved in her heart, and she couldn't help but burst into tears again. She bit her lips, her body trembled slightly, and she pressed the hat tightly on her head. At the same time, after handing the straw hat to Nami, Luffy walked towards the Arlong Empire. Behind him, Yuta, Zoro, Sanji, and Usopp followed closely. After seeing 5 strangers suddenly breaking in, the fishmen in the Arlong Empire stopped what they were doing. They gathered spontaneously and gradually formed a circle, surrounding the 5 people. The leader of the fishmen, Arlong, sat motionless on the chair, with a smile on his face, looking at Luffy and his friends with amusement in his eyes. Behind him, at the entrance of the Arlong Empire. Seeing Luffy and his friends being surrounded by dozens of fishmen in the blink of an eye, the villagers were suddenly filled with worry. Are they really okay? There are nearly 50 fishmen on the other side. It turns out that we shouldn't have brought them here just now. The other fishmen are okay, only 10 times stronger than us ordinary people. But the officers under Eren are the elite among the fishmen. Especially Eren, he is a big pirate with a bounty of 20 million berries. I am afraid that no one in this East China Sea can defeat him. Luffy, you said you could defeat Arlong, you really weren't lying to me, were you? Nokiko looked at Luffy's back with worry in his eyes and murmured. At the same time, Luffy. The others are up to you. Luffy said in a deep voice. The 4 people behind him nodded. Then, Luffy took heavy steps and walked to Arlong step by step. Arlong sat leisurely on the chair, with a smile on his face and disdain and amusement in his eyes. He looked at Luffy and said. Who are you? Are you here to stand up for Nami? Didn't Nami tell you how terrifying we fishmen are? Or, are you a fool who came here to die? Eren raised his eyebrows, his eyes showing disdain and contempt, and laughed up to the sky. Ha 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 ha. Facing Arlong's provocation and insult, Luffy did not respond. He just had a gloomy face, which made people feel suffocated. Arlong saw that Luffy was like a piece of wood and immediately lost interest. Cut. Just as he was about to attack and crush the seemingly weak human in front of him, he suddenly saw Luffy's mouth begin to open. The next second, Luffy roared in anger, and the sound could be heard throughout the Arlong Empire. Nami. Hearing this roar, everyone immediately cast their eyes towards Luffy. Nami, who was crying with her straw hat pressed down, bit her lip, looked up at Luffy while crying, and murmured Luffy's name. Luffy. Then, the voice that echoed throughout the venue rang out again. Quote. You showed me clearly. Nami listened to Luffy's roar and stared at him without blinking. Then, Luffy slowly clenched his fist and raised it slowly. He continued to speak to Nami in a voice that resounded throughout the venue. Quote. Stuff like this. Hearing Luffy insult him like this, Arlong's eyes were immediately filled with anger. Dozens of fishmen in the audience were also enraged by Luffy and stared at him fiercely. But Luffy didn't care, as if he was arrogant. Quote. I can solve it with just a flick of my finger. With a roar, Luffy's fist shot out like a bullet. No one in the audience could even see Luffy's movements clearly. The next second, everyone was extremely shocked to find that the extremely tall and strong Arlong was easily crushed on the ground like an ant. The jagged nose was directly hit and shrunk, and the whole face was sunken, completely deformed, and bloody. There was no trace of human appearance. Even the ground where he was lying was deeply cracked over a large area, like a meteorite falling to the ground and smashing a deep pit. Suddenly, the whole audience was stunned. The fishmen under Arlong's command were full of disbelief and horror in their eyes. Looking at Arlong lying there motionless, their hearts were trembling. Brother Eren. That guy took Brother Eren. Impossible. That's Brother Eren, the strongest fishman. At this moment, the villagers at the door were all stunned and looked at Luffy in disbelief. Actually gave Eren. Knocked down. Just one punch. That guy is so strong. Luffy. You really gave Eren. Nokiko looked at Luffy's back, tears welling up in her eyes. Nami, who was sitting on the ground, also stared at Luffy blankly, with mixed feelings in her heart. Happiness, relief, surprise, regret and other emotions surged into Nami's heart in an instant. In the end, she just murmured Luffy's name like Nokiko did. Luffy. After defeating Arlong, Luffy did not stop. Instead, he turned around and faced the towering building that was known as the symbol of the Arlong Empire. Luffy called out to Nami again. Nami. Nami looked at Luffy without blinking. Quote. From now on, you must be good. Luffy said as he raised his right foot. The fruit ability was activated, and Luffy's foot stretched all the way to the top of the Arlong Empire. Quote. Rely on me, the captain. Luffy slashed down suddenly. His right foot was like a huge battle axe, slashing down from the top. The Arlong Empire also collapsed and turned into ruins with Luffy's rapidly falling battle axe. The Arlong Empire is broken. When the Arlong Empire collapsed under Luffy's foot, the whole audience was shocked again. The fishmen looked at Luffy with fear and horror, and subconsciously murmured. That rascal, what's going on? How did you do that just now? The legendary devil fruit user. Shattering the Arlong Empire with just one kick, is this really not a dream? Horrible, terrible, too terrible. For a moment, most of the fishmen were in fear and shock of Luffy. The villagers were not as panicked as the fishmen, but they were just as shocked as them. That Straw Hat Boy is so strong. He could defeat Arlong with one punch and crush Arlong's empire with one kick. What the Straw Hat Boy said was true. He could defeat Arlong with just a flick of his finger. Hello. Hey, everyone. In this way. Does it mean we start from now? It's liberated. Someone suddenly said. All of the villagers were stunned for a moment. Boom. After a short moment of shock, all the villagers were excited and cheered to celebrate. Great, I'm finally free. We no longer have to pay Arlong and his gang for our lives. We are finally free. Hurry up, I need to tell the other people on the island about this news so that everyone can celebrate. Nami, you can finally live for yourself. Nohigo said happily, looking at Nami who was squatting there and trembling slightly. Just when she was about to comfort Nami and share this joy with her, she suddenly saw Nami suddenly stand up and rush towards Luffy. Luffy, looking at the completely collapsed Arlong Empire in front of him, finally let out a sigh of relief. Thinking that there was still a goal that had not been solved, Luffy planned to take Nami with him to find the rat colonel who robbed Nami of her money. At this moment, he suddenly felt a breath rushing towards him quickly. When he turned his head to look, he saw a figure suddenly pounce on him and hugged him tightly. Luffy, thanks. Thank you for saving me. Saving Nokigo. Saving this village. Real. Thank you. Nami hugged Luffy tightly, leaned on his shoulder, and cried and thanked him, her voice choked with sobs. Luffy smiled, and the anger in his heart was instantly dispelled. He touched Nami's hair and said softly. Didn't I tell you that I will never let anything happen to my crew members? Luffy told Nami this when he first invited her to join. Now when Nami heard Luffy say this again, she burst into tears and cried even harder. Even though she drove away Luffy's ship and stole Luffy's treasure, Luffy still treated her as a crew member. Hey, Nami. Did you hear what I just said? From now on, you have to rely on me as the captain. Your captain, am very strong. Luffy said seriously to Nami who was lying on his shoulder. Nami sniffed and stopped crying temporarily, then nodded heavily. Yeah, I understand. As soon as Nami finished speaking, Luffy suddenly said in an extremely exaggerated and disgusted tone. Hey, Nami, you didn't run your snot all over my clothes, did you? It's dirty. Nami pushed Luffy away angrily, snarling and cursing. You are an idiot, a huge idiot. You are an incurable idiot. Nami kept scolding Luffy, and was angry that he still cared about such things at this time. He was really hopeless. But at this moment, she suddenly saw Luffy grinning and said. Hee. You are not sad anymore. Let's go, Nami. Let's go beat up the guy who stole your money. Luffy said and turned to walk towards the exit. Nami stared at Luffy's back and muttered to herself. Did that idiot say that on purpose just now so that he wouldn't let me continue to be sad? That idiot. Are they really that smart? Nami was skeptical, but she quickly caught up with Luffy. When they arrived at the door, Luffy saw Nojiko, Ken, and some villagers still guarding here, so he said to them. You guys go back to the village first. I'll take Nami to get her money back, and then beat up that rat colonel. At this time, a voice came from behind Luffy. I'll go with you guys. Luffy knew it was Yuta without looking back. The fishmen here were just ragtag soldiers, and those officers were not at the same level as Yuta. Rather than wasting time with these ragtag soldiers, Yuta wanted to watch Luffy beat up that rat colonel. More importantly, she also wanted to add a couple of punches to avenge Nami. Luffy nodded in agreement. Ken looked behind Luffy, at Zoro and the other two who were surrounded by dozens of fishmen, then looked at Luffy and asked with some concern. The three of them. Is it okay? They had seen how strong Luffy was, but they didn't know how strong his crew was. Facing about 50 fishmen, with only 3 people, he was still a little worried. Especially the swordsman, who was wrapped in bandages and looked seriously injured. Is this really okay? Luffy smiled and said. The 3 of them are now wishing for more opponents. There are enough for the 3 of them here. The 3 of them, stimulated by Luffy, became stronger day by day, and they wished that there were as many opponents as possible, so that they could grow up quickly and match Luffy's strength. After Luffy finished speaking, he took Nami and Yuta with him. They left here. Ken and Nokiko looked at them, then turned back to look at Zoro and the others. Since Luffy said so, they didn't worry about it anymore. So, they led the team back to Kokoja village. In the crumbling Arlong Empire. Zoro, Sanji, and Usopp stood in a row, surrounded by about 50 fishmen and 3 fishman leaders. At this moment, the fishmen were still immersed in the shock and fear of Luffy's instant killing of Arlong and the destruction of the Arlong Empire. At this time, the kissing fishman leader suddenly spoke up. The man in the straw hat is gone, we don't need to be afraid anymore. Only 3 people are left. They underestimate us fishmen. We the Murlocs are a great race, and humans are nothing but trash. We are no match for them. Fellow fishmen, these people killed Brother Along. We must kill them and avenge Brother Along. When these words came out, all the fishmen immediately remembered Along's miserable condition, and they were filled with anger. There were only 3 people on the opposite side, and they had more than 50 fishmen and 3 cadres. What was there to be afraid of? Just when the fishmen were in a state of anger and momentum, Zoro and the other 2 seemed to have seen nothing. The 3 of them were talking to each other. Leave the octopus swordsman to me. Zoro held Wado Ikimonji and stared at the cadre, the octopus swordsman Hachiko. Leave that big guy to me. Sanji lit a cigarette and looked at the cartilaginous fishman cadre, Kruby. Then the one who is talking now is my prey. Usopp adjusted his glasses and locked his eyes on the kissing fishman cadre, Aki. What about the remaining miscellaneous fish? Whoever grabs it first gets it. Agree. It's on. X3. Near the village of Kokoja, on a hidden coast. This place is remote and not easily discovered. At this moment, a warship is parked with the word, 16 inches marked on it. It is the captain of the 16th branch of the Navy, the captain of the Mouse. Mashimoshi. This is the Navy headquarters. Inside the cabin, a Den Den Mushi sounded like this. Next to the Den Den Mushi, Colonel Mouse looked terrified and said to the Den Den Mushi in a panic, almost screaming. Is this the headquarters? I am Colonel Mouse of the 16th Marine Branch, Navy number 00733. I want to make a request to headquarters. You don't have to yell, I can hear you. A voice complained from the other end of the Den Den Mushi. But Colonel Mouse didn't care at all and continued to speak loudly in a panic. Listen up, there is a pirate named Luffy wearing a straw hat, and he and his men are the enemy of our world government. That straw hat Luffy. That straw hat Luffy. As Colonel Mouse spoke, he recalled an unforgettable scene he had just seen while hiding near the Arlong Empire. He had planned to give Arlong's share to Nami after dividing the money he had taken from her. But he happened to meet Luffy and his gang breaking into the Arlong Empire. Then he saw with his own eyes how Luffy killed Arlong with one punch and shattered the Arlong Empire with one kick. This terrifying strength immediately made him run back in fear, and he planned to ask the headquarters to offer a reward for Luffy and then leave here quickly. Hearing Colonel Mouse repeating a name over and over again, there was a hint of impatience from the other end of the Den Den Mushi. What happened to that straw hat Luffy? Please tell me in detail. The Mouse Colonel exclaimed. That straw hat Luffy, who killed the captain of the Fishman pirates with one punch, Arlong, who had a bounty of 20 million Baileys. His strength is very terrifying. He has the strength to crush a small fortress with one kick. On the other end of the Den Den Mushi, the Navy officer in charge of recording was shocked when he heard Colonel Mouse's description and asked. Did I hear you right? You said a rookie killed a pirate with a bounty of 20 million berries with one punch. If I remember correctly, the 16th branch of the Navy is located in the East China Sea. How could such a strong rookie pirate be born in the weakest sea area of the East China Sea? Facing the doubt, Colonel Mouse said in a voice that was almost roaring. You heard it right. That Straw Hat Luffy is very dangerous and a vicious pirate. Please list him as a wanted criminal with a bounty on his head. You can capture him alive or kill him. I will send you his photo now. After Colonel Mouse finished speaking, he placed the photo of Luffy that his men had just taken while lying on a wall under the eyes of Den Den Mushi. It was the photo of Luffy and his group breaking into the Arlong Empire, when Nami was crying for help. In the photo, he lowered the brim of his hat with one hand, his expression was gloomy, and the shadow covered one eye, revealing the other eye filled with anger. He looked very dangerous and terrifying. After receiving the photo, the recorder immediately believed Colonel Mouse's words. He was indeed extremely vicious. We have received the photos, and we will. Ah. The recorder was still talking when he suddenly heard Colonel Mouse's screams from the other end of the Den Den Mushi. He immediately asked in panic. What happens? Hello? Can you hear me? Are you okay over there? The recorder finished speaking, and then heard a low and cold strange voice coming from the other side. I am Monk D. Luffy. Hearing this name, the recorder was shocked and stood up from his seat suddenly, which immediately attracted the attention of all the Navy around. The recorder asked in panic. What you up to? What did you do to Colonel Mouse? I warn you, Colonel Mouse is a naval captain. You are provoking our Navy by doing this, and you will face the wrath of our Navy. On the other side of the Den Den Mushi, Luffy's face was gloomy, and Colonel Mouse was trembling with fear and trembling under his feet. Luffy sneered at the warning from the Navy headquarters. Ha! It is unfortunate for the Navy to have such scum in your Navy. Since your Navy doesn't take care of it, then I will take care of it. I'll help you clean up this scum before he tarnishes the reputation of some old man's proud Navy. If you Navy are angry, just come on. Card clip. Luffy hung up the Den Mushi. Hello. 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 The recorder kept yelling at the Den Den Mushi, but could not hear any response. What's going on? Why is there such a loud noise? At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded behind him. The recorder turned around and saw Major Branu of the Navy headquarters with green curly hair and sunglasses. Seeing the person coming, the recorder immediately saluted in panic. Major Branu. Sorry, I'm too excited. Branu waved his hand to show that he didn't mind, and then asked about the business. Who were you talking to just now? Why are you so flustered? The recorder became flustered again, with fear in his eyes, and answered. The opponent is a vicious rookie pirate. He killed Arlong, the captain of the Fishman Pirates, whose bounty was 20 million berries, with one punch. In front of our Navy headquarters, Colonel Mouse, the colonel of the 16th Navy branch, was killed. They also provoked our Navy and threatened. The recorder couldn't say anything, so he played the recording of the Den Den Mushi just now. If you Navy are angry, just come on. Card clip. The recording ended, and the whole hall was filled with silence. All the Navy officers were stunned and terrified. How could a rookie pirate kill a pirate worth 20 million berries in 1 second? How strong is he? Moreover, he directly challenged the Navy headquarters and ignored the wrath of the Navy headquarters. How terrible will this rookie be when he grows up? And Branu was also frowning at this moment, realizing the seriousness of the problem. If such a terrifying rookie pirate really appeared, it would be really bad. There will definitely be a vicious criminal on the sea in the future. We must hold a meeting quickly to discuss this matter with all the officers in charge of the newcomers in the headquarters. Luffy, after hanging up the Den Den Mushi, turned his attention to Colonel Mouse at his feet. He had noticed the presence of Colonel Mouse and other Navy officers in the Arlong Empire. However, he thought that these people would definitely not be carrying the money taken from Nami, so he thought of following them secretly and finding where the money was hidden. Then, they found this secret warship here. Where's Nami's money? Luffy asked in a deep voice. He was furious when he thought that this man had taken away the treasure that Nami had saved for 8 years. Colonel Mouse pointed to a large box against the wall and said. Exist. In that box. Nami immediately walked over and opened the box. Suddenly, the golden treasure came into her sight. Great, My treasure is back. Nami grabbed a handful of treasure and said happily. At this time, Luffy looked at Colonel Mouse and asked Nami. Nami, you want to vent your anger? Use this thing. Vent out all the hurt and grievances you have suffered from A Long and his gang in the past 8 years. Nami's face darkened when she heard this. She put down the treasure in her hand, slowly stood up, and walked over step by step. Looking at the mouse colonel who was waving his hands in fear and begging for mercy, she said in a deep voice. 8 years. You and Eren have been deceiving me as a tool to make money for 8 years. I risked my life to earn this money from other pirates. They are my hope, the hope of Kokoja village. As a result, our hopes were trampled and played with so easily by you and Eren. Those were Eren's ideas. He asked me to do this. It's none of my business. Colonel Mouse screamed in panic, trying to put all the blame on Eren. If you, a naval captain, had taken some responsibility, would we have been bullied by Eren and his gang for 8 years? You and A Long have been collecting money from dozens of villages near us. What is the difference between you and A Long? Nami asked angrily. Colonel Mouse wanted to argue, but he saw Nami took out 2 iron bars and formed a stick. Then he heard her continue angrily. You and Eren, they are all unforgivable sinners. After saying that, Nami used her iron rod to hit Colonel Mouse with all her strength. Along with the screams, Luffy and Luke joined in. A brutal three-way fight began. Suddenly, the screams became more intense. In a meeting room at the Navy headquarters, Branu stood at the top. Behind him was a whiteboard with a photo on it. It was the photo of Luffy that Colonel Mouse had taken and sent to him. Branu looked serious as he looked at the 20 or so dignified naval officers who were attending the meeting. He said in a serious tone. Then, I will introduce the most evil rookie in history, Monkey. D.I. will explain Luffy's situation to everyone present. At night, in Kokoja village, a huge bonfire was lit in the square in the middle of the village. Around the bonfire, people were laughing, singing, dancing, and toasting to celebrate. It was so lively. The whole village was liberated, so many villagers gained freedom, and the Arlong Empire was crushed, and Colonel Mouse was killed. There were so many things to be happy about, so of course a banquet had to be held. On a high platform, Yuta sang happily. Below were a group of villagers who were drunk with red faces, giggling constantly, and showing their drunkenness. Usopp mixed in with them, holding 2 chopsticks, inserting them into both nostrils, pressing against his lower lip, and acting ugly. The villagers laughed. Zoro lay aside, drinking wine in big gulps, and occasionally exclaimed, "Ah," with satisfaction. Sanji's eyes turned into hearts, raised his hands high, and danced happily with the girls in the village, dancing like seaweed. Luffy was still doing his favorite thing, eating meat in big mouthfuls. His mouth was bulging, just like a guinea pig's mouth will bulge out 2 huge cheeks when it is full of food. Nami, you are finally free. On the side of the fire, Nokigao looked at the joyous scene, and raised her glass to Nami with joy from the bottom of her heart. Nami sat beside her, also with a happy smile on her face. She didn't know how many times she had dreamed of this scene. Today, she finally saw it. Yes, I am finally free. Nami breathed a sigh of relief and drank happily with Noki. Nami, you have met a group of very good friends. Nohigo took a sip of wine and stared at a certain direction. Luffy, who was eating heartily. That stupid captain. No, Mr. Luffy really did it, just like he said. Hearing Nokiko's voice, Nami followed her gaze and looked at Luffy. When she saw Luffy's crazy eating, she couldn't help but complain. That idiot, no one is competing with him for the food, but he is still eating so eagerly, really. Hearing Nami's angry voice, Nokiko couldn't help but chuckled. Cluck, cluck, cluck. After the laughter, Nokigao took a deep breath and sighed. That's great, Nami. Nami looked at Nohigo in confusion and asked. What? Nochigao looked up at the sky, his eyes shining like the stars in the sky, full of hope, his face filled with a happy expression, and said. It's great that you can meet Mr. Luffy. From now on, you can finally live for yourself and do what you like. Don't you dream of drawing a map of the entire world. Next, you can realize your dream with Mr. Luffy. Nami looked at Nojiko in a daze after hearing what she said. Nojiko always supported her silently behind her, felt happy for her happiness and sad for her sadness. For a moment, looking at this person who had supported her silently from childhood to adulthood, like a real sister. Nami's reluctance surged out, and she hugged Nojiko tightly. Hey, Nohigo. Come with me. I'll be very happy if you're here. In this way, you can experience the same happiness that I feel with me. Hearing Nami's words, Nokigo's eyes were full of longing. If this is the case, she will definitely feel happy every day. But, Nokigo's eyes dimmed a little, and he patted Nami's back gently and said, No way, Nami. I am not as talented as you in sailing. If I go with you, it will only cause trouble for Mr. Luffy. And, I have to stay and look after the orange trees in Belmare. Belmere will be very sad if no one takes care of those orange trees. Nami could only sob reluctantly as she listened to Nokigo's words, her body trembling slightly. Nokiko, are you willing to join us and go out to sea with us? At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded beside the two of them. They looked up and saw Luffy holding a large piece of meat in his hand. He came to them at some point. Facing Luffy's question, Nokiko was stunned. Mr. Luffy. Luffy continued. It's fun to go sailing with us. Didn't you also hear about it from Nami? Nohigao still stared at Luffy blankly, and said with some uncertainty. But, I can't do anything, and going there will only cause trouble for Mr. Luffy and everyone, right? Besides, I need to take care of the orange trees in Belmare. As Nokiko spoke, her voice became smaller and smaller. Of course, she wanted to go out to sea with Luffy and Nami, but she felt that everyone on the ship had their own unique abilities and could stand on their own in a certain field, and she herself didn't seem to be able to help everyone. And Belmare's orange trees couldn't be left unattended. Just when Nokiko was feeling down, he heard Luffy continue to say. Don't you take good care of those orange trees. I plan to move some orange trees from that orange grove to the Mary. This will make you and Nami very happy. And everyone can eat fresh oranges. Nakigo, why don't you join us and take care of those orange trees? As our ship's botanist, I will help you learn botany knowledge. And you don't have to worry about causing trouble for us, I will train each of you to be very strong. As for the remaining orange trees in the garden, I think the windmill uncle is quite capable, so please let him take care of them. Also, don't you want to sail the world map drawn by Nami yourself? Luffy's words solved all the problems that Nojiko was worried about. Especially when he heard the last sentence, he personally sailed through the map drawn by Nami. That kind of thing must be very happy. Nojiko's tears suddenly burst out with excitement. Luffy. Nami also looked at Nohigo excitedly, with stars in her eyes. Nohigo, come with us. Let's go to sea. Nojiko shed tears, looked at Nami and Luffy respectively, then bit her lip and nodded heavily. The next morning. In Kokoja village, on the coast, on the Golden Mary. Luffy and his companions stood on the deck, with the villagers below them preparing to say goodbye. They were all looking up at the central street of the village, waiting for something. Nami and Nokiko are so slow. Why haven't they come in such a long time? Usopp looked up at the street and asked in confusion. Nami said she wanted to remove the tattoo of Arlong and his gang on her arm, so it will be late. Yuta replied, and then looked at Luffy. By the way, is Nojiko really going to go with us, Luffy? Yuta's eyes were filled with surprise. This way, she would have another little sister. Yes. She promised me last night, and I moved Belmere's orange trees to our ship. She will definitely not ignore them. Luffy looked at the orange trees that had been planted on the top of the cabin and replied. Oh, here it comes. At this time, Usopp suddenly shouted in surprise. Strange, why is Nokiko the only one there? Seeing that only one person appeared, Usopp added strangely. Is that woman not coming? Zoro leaned against the outer wall of the cabin and said leisurely. You green algae head, shut up your crow mouth. If Miss Nami doesn't come, I will throw you down from here. Sanji bared his teeth and roared at Zoro. Hearing this, Zoro also got angry and looked angry. You wanna fight? Come on. Who's afraid of who? In the blink of an eye, the two of them were grinning at each other. The rest of the people turned a blind eye to this common scene. When Nojiko came near the Mary, Luffy asked curiously. Nokigo, where is Nami? Nokigo said breathlessly. Nami said, let me get on the boat first, she will come later. Luffy pulled Nojiko on board. At this time, people saw a figure appear on the street in the distance again. Hurry up and start the boat. Nami shouted to Luffy and the others from a distance. As soon as she finished speaking, Nami made a running gesture and ran towards the Mary. What is she going to do? Usopp looked puzzled. Well, just listen to Nami and start the boat first. Luffy has already thought of something. This is how Nami boarded the ship in the original book, stole all the villagers' wallets. Luffy looked at the villagers below who were still worried and reluctant to leave, and couldn't help but mourn for them in his heart. Did that girl want to leave without even waiting for us to thank her? You left all 100 million Baileys to us, at least take some with you. Stop now, Nami, at least let us thank you properly. Someone turned around and suddenly found that the Mary had already set sail. Ah, they are setting sail, please wait, we have something to thank you for. Yes, Straw Hat Boy. Don't leave without saying goodbye like that. At this moment, Nami's figure had already arrived beside the villagers. The villagers immediately raised their hands to stop her, each with a serious expression, ready to fight. We won't let you pass, Nami. However, a figure as nimble as a flying cat shuttled through the crowd quickly, easily avoiding interception, and jumped onto the Mary, which had already started sailing. The villagers were sad and reluctant, with tears in their eyes. Nami. Why? That's too much. Nami. You just left without saying goodbye to us. Just as the villagers were crying, they suddenly saw Nami standing on the deck, shaking her clothes. The next second, countless wallets fell like rain. Seeing this scene, all the villagers were shocked. They began to search their pockets. Soon. My wallet is gone. Mine is gone too. Mine too. Me too. At this time, Nami tilted her head and picked up a banknote, showing a smug smile and said, Everyone, take care of yourselves. The villagers had lost their sadness and were filled with anger. That little is so brave. You little thief. Come back soon and give me my wallet back. As the Mary gradually went away, Nami and Nohigo lay on the side of the boat and waved to the villagers on the shore. Goodbye everyone. Jien. Belle-Mare's orange trees are in your care. Everyone, let's go. X2. On the coast, all the villagers burst into tears. The sky was clear and the breeze was blowing. On the vast sea, the Mary was sailing slowly. On the deck, Zoro, Sanji, and Usopp were desperately training the extreme bodybuilding method that Luffy had taught them, in order to catch up with Luffy as soon as possible. Nami, Yuta, and Nokiko, the three girls, gathered together to study and plan various logistical matters on the ship. Nami and Nokiko were naturally taught the training method by Luffy, but because they were born with weaker physiques than Zoro and the others, they couldn't hold on after training for a few hours every day, so they had to rest and adjust. Now, they have completed the training and are free to study other things. In fact, Luffy didn't intend to let them become top strongmen by physical skills. Everyone has different talents, and they can't become strong by training hard. So Luffy's plan is to find the devil fruit that suits them and let them develop their fruit abilities if they encounter the right opportunity in the future. As for Luffy himself, he would sit by the boat to fish, guide Zoro and the other two, and then get close to Yuta and the others to chat with them. In short, he is free and easy, doing nothing. Of course, if there are any important things or decisions on the ship, he will still participate. Gu. At this moment, a bird chirped above everyone's head. Everyone looked up and saw the seagull with a newspaper backpack hanging around its neck. It's the news bird. Nami exclaimed in surprise, then quickly walked to where the news bird landed and bought a newspaper from it. Why is the price going up again? Seeing the price on the newsbird backpack, Nami couldn't help but complain angrily. But she still took out 100 Baileys to buy a newspaper. Let me see, what's the news today? Nami muttered as she walked to the chair where Luffy was lying in the sun and sat down. Coup in Villa. Why is there such news again? There are so many such news in the world recently. Nami muttered as she opened the newspaper and prepared to read the other side. Suddenly, something flew out when she opened the newspaper and landed on the deck. For a moment, everyone on the ship was attracted by the sudden appearance of the thing. When they looked in the direction of the landing, suddenly, everyone's pupils were shocked. They saw a bounty order lying on the ground, and the information in the bounty order was Monk D. Luffy, bounty of 60 million Baileys, dead or alive. At the same time, in an office at the Navy headquarters, Admiral Sengoku sat at his desk, his face gloomy and angry. In front of him was a bounty order, and the person on it was Luffy. Next to his desk, Akainu, Aokiji, and Kizaru sat on several chairs, each holding a bounty order for Luffy. How scary. This rookie pirate. The first bounty is as high as 60 million Baileys, he deserves to be called the worst rookie. Kizaru looked at Luffy's gloomy expression on the bounty order and showed an exaggerated look of fear. Humph. All pirates deserve to die. No matter what evil they are, I will eradicate them all. Akainu's face was fierce, his tone was firm, and there was a strong murderous intent in his eyes. Monkey D. Luffy, Mr. Garp's grandson. Aokiji murmured. At this moment, a voice suddenly came from the door. Zanguo, I heard you were looking for me. What's up? As soon as the voice fell, Garp walked in slowly, holding a senbei in his hand. Seeing the newcomer, Zanguo's eyes suddenly flashed with ferocity. Bang! He slammed the table and said angrily. Garp, look at the good grandson you taught. Luffy. Garp muttered, and came to Sengoku's desk, and saw the bounty at a glance. At the same time, Sengoku said angrily. The reward for this is as high as 60 million Baileys. Do you know what this means? He also killed the Navy captain in front of the Navy headquarters, provoking the Navy. Tell me, how did you teach this grandson? Thanks for watching.